Good afternoon. Today is January 29th, and the Board of Commissioners workshop meeting is called to order at 2:01. Will the city clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Black,
Present.
Vice Mayor Weinstein. Here. Commissioner Hodges.
Here.
Commissioner Oakley.
Here.
Commissioner Douther.
Present.
First thing on the agenda is public comment. This is for anything that is not on the agenda. Please remember to state your full name and address and speak clearly and distinctly into the microphone, and remember to be civil and polite.
Madam Mayor, if I may, staff is requesting that item F, the joint use agreement of Fisherman's Alley, be moved up on the agenda to go immediately following the King of the Beach report. We have our land use attorney present, and they have another engagement that they have to be at in Tampa.
All right, I think we have a consensus to do that. Is that correct?
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Yes.
Is this on? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, speak a little closer to the mic.
Sure. Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners, and my home audience. I'm Missy Hahn, Treasure Island, Madeira Beach, Chamber of Commerce, located on 12601 Goff Boulevard. So come to our new place. I have 3 events coming up, and I just want to make sure that the home audience, as well as the rest of the public, know what we're doing. So we have our annual dinner. That's for everyone, and I know I'm seeing most of you there. That's this Thursday evening at the Bilmar Beach Resort. On February 7th at 6:30 here in the chambers, we're doing a municipal election debate where we have invited all the commissioners that are running or want to run to come to do a debate. We have a moderator and the date, and we'll be following up with that. But that is, the public is welcome. You don't have to be a chamber member to come. Anybody from Madeira Beach is welcome. And last but not least, on February 14th, Valentine's Day, here again at the Madeira Beach City Center, we're doing a grant writing education for our chamber class. Again, public's welcome, chamber members welcome to come. If you have a business that you're looking for grants, this is a great place to start. Thank you for your time and attention.
What time is that, Missy?
The grant writing one is 10 a.m. here, and that's February 14th. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak? Public comment is now closed. The first item on the next item under topics for discussion is King of the Beach. Director Hatch.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. This is the wrap up for the fall King of the Beach. We received the first piece of information, their application, on February 7th, 2018, initiating the contract for that event, and then received the pro forma on December 26th, 2018, which wrapped up the conclusion of all of the information that we needed. Everything else was provided where within via the application and supporting documentation, as well as payments for the event as billed and as necessary. And at this time, the staff reports that the terms of the contract for the Fall King of the Beach have been completed and are satisfactory upon our reviewing. I wanted to open up and see if you guys had any questions or concerns related to that, and clarify anything we can.
Who paid for the police?
They did. The security for required for the
Right.
alcohol sales, it was them.
And this invoice for the porta potties, was it billed to them as well?
Yes.
It doesn't state on the invoice here.
Yes, it was. As far as items such as the security and the portalets and anything that's outside of city services, we just ask that we have a proof that they've been secured, and then payment and financial stuff has to do with them.
And this P and L, it's dated January 1st through December 18th, 2018. Is that for everything they've done all year? The spring one and the fall one?
Yeah,
This
it's
is
combination.
supposed to be a pro forma for the October, November King of the Beach.
Well, yes, and we did, they had a very similar one the previous event. The issue that we ran into is requesting certain information from them. It crept into their proprietary requirements of their event, which provides them with a competitive advantage for their event. So this was similar to the one that we received at the last event, and
I didn't think much on the one from the last event, but we need one for that one event. That's the way we set it up when we did it. We requested one for the one event, not a yearly ongoing with them. As I recall, do y'all recall that one?
Yes, I understood this performa to be strictly for the November event, even though it says January 1st through December 18th, because I assumed that revenue was coming in
throughout the year.
all year for this particular event. And then I looked down at the charitable contributions, okay, of $10,000. And I specifically had it noted that that was per event that they give away the $10,000, which I just think is number one, it's such a small amount when you consider their revenues of $373,000 for one event. But the other thing is, of course, is that I disagree with the fact that of course, that the city waives our fees, and yet the charitable contributions come in and they're passed over to charities. And I don't think that that's right, but that's another story. I've said that too often, so we can forget that. But I think that this actual performa is really just for the November event.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Correct.
And all the figures on it are just for November? Okay.
We just said it's for the whole I year. just asked
Well,
the question. This is for the whole year, so it includes the spring event. I mean, that's.
It is, there's a specific one, and we have Amy here as well to answer any questions as we need. But they have, as Commissioner Weinstein said, there is revenue, sponsorships, registrations, whatever else, rolling in throughout the year for their event. So we have one for the spring event and we have one for the fall event. This is for the fall event
Well, that was my
occurring in
question.
between those dates. Well, I misunderstood the question the first time. The wording didn't make sense, so.
Right. I also had a question about the charity checks and the youth donation. And I agree with Commissioner Weinstein. I was surprised to see it was only $10,000 in charity. But I'd also be curious to know how much was spent on the rods and reels that were given out.
Okay, I can follow up with that information.
Thank you.
I also had a question regarding this setup and tear down. I understand it's a big deal, but the fact that we don't charge a fee I mean, this is 5 days they use for setting up and tearing down. Where if somebody rents that room over there and they want to spend an hour putting up a tree for a Christmas party or something, we go after them and charge them another hour. It just doesn't make sense that we don't have something in line with that. I mean, 5 days for the ball fields to be out of use, that just seems strange to me. And I think we need to look at that in the fee schedule.
Madam Mayor, if I may, Director Hatch, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it's the spring event where they do pay for the aeration of the field, and most of the setup associated with this event does not require city staff effectively setting up anything besides opening the facilities for them to utilize the spaces. So in the situation whereby we're looking at setting up chairs and tables, that's actually city hours that are being expended as opposed to this particular event where they're doing the setup and breakdown. But I believe it's the spring event, if I'm not mistaken. They do pay money that offsets expenses for the city for aeration of the field and top dressing, if that is correct.
Yeah, that's correct. It was like, yeah.
Any more discussion?
No, bottom line that I did want to clarify this, so the bottom line that they did pay this to the city for this event was $2,524.
Correct.
Okay. I wanted to make sure I wasn't taking off anything I wasn't supposed to, okay?
No more questions or discussion? All right. Thank you, Director Hatch.
Thank you, Jay.
It's pretty pathetic, yeah.
Thank you.
Next, we go to item F, which we're moving up under item A, and that's the joint use agreement with Fisherman's Alley. Is Director Portel in the house? There.
Hi, good afternoon. It's Julia Mandel. I'm with the law firm of Gray Robinson. I'm serving as your special land use counsel, and you have before you for your discussion, today is a workshop, so I don't today, an airspace encroachment and joint use agreement for the roadway over the existing Fisherman's Alley. It's my understanding that the developer would like to build a parking garage, which is cantilevers completely over what the existing Fisherman's Alley, and also to expand Fisherman Alley to, I think, bring it up to a 12 or 15-foot width. It's currently much smaller, and so this would allow that construction to occur over the alley. I understand the alley and its current configuration is owned by the city as part of a deeded right-of-way. So in order for them to expand it, my recommendation is they go ahead and grant a transportation easement over that portion, which will be improved, and the airspace encroachment would be allowed over that area, which is currently serving as right-of-way. There is some fee-sharing revenue as it relates to the parking garage that's also within the agreement that's in front of you. I did want to tell you that that agreement is a draft. I have been working with the attorney who is representing John's Pass, and there are a few additional changes relating to public records that I'm making sure are in there so that we assure any of the documents that they have in their possession come to us if they're public records so that we don't run afoul of the public records law, which can get a little bit interesting when you're dealing with these kinds of agreements. So I'm working with them on that. But in terms of what's in front of you, the terms are pretty much going to stay what they are. We do need to have some exhibits that are also going to be presented to us, as well as an easement, a separate easement for the portion of the alley, which will be improved. I'm available for any questions that you might have.
Ms. Mandel, excuse me. By approving this here, this gives the city the parking spaces that they originally talked to us about, is that correct?
That's my understanding. This would allow them to develop the area over the alley so that all of the parking spaces that were talked about during the course, and I wasn't privy to all your conversations, but that's my understanding with this little comment.
Okay, but without the agreement then, the city would not get any of the parking then?
Well, I will tell you, without the agreement, there's no way for them to construct the parking garage over the alleyway as it exists today.
Okay, thank you.
I've got a question, but I don't know if it goes to you or if it goes to Linda. How far along are we on this, with this, number one? And my question comes down to that I haven't talked to you guys about this yet, but you know, from what I'm reading is they're saying by 2040, 40% of the cars on the road are going to be electrical. How do we make it that anybody that builds from this point on Madeira Beach have 30% of their parking or 25% of their parking available for electric cars? I mean, if we want to clean the air, we want to clean the beach, we need to start with the basics. And, you know, we ran into the same problem where I live. We've had 3 or 4 tenants now that have electric cars, and I'm going, how do we handle this? Where do we plug in at? What do we do? So with this new construction and these hotels and buildings will probably last a lot longer than 20 years. You know, we need to be looking at that right now and putting that into the contract that they're required to have X amount of, you know, outlets for electrical cars, you know, and move forward that way.
Madam Mayor, Commissioners, there are 2 different questions there. The first is how far along are we with this project or this proposal? At this point, we have not processed any of the building or site plan applications because the application involves or includes property that's owned by the city. And unless the city agrees to become a part of this, legally I can't process a zoning request change for that property. So nobody can request a zoning change for somebody else's property. So that's the point in bringing this forward to you before anything else. There have been 2 neighborhood meetings, and there have been concept plans and actually some fairly detailed site-type material presented as part of a PD application. But again, we have not processed it or reviewed it because it was always possible that some agreement you came to in the course of this, even if you did prove it, might have an effect on how the property was arranged or designed. As to the second part of the question, again, this is a PD, and we don't have anything on the books right now requiring charging stations for electric cars. If that's something that you want us to bring back, we can begin doing that and bring a code revision back to include that as part of our parking for the future. For this project, because it has not been designed and because it's a PD and because you would be involved in it, you can require a certain portion of the parking spaces to be electric. I don't know which proportion that would be. We might want to come back to you with a little bit more detailed research and recommendation. But that could be part of the conditions that you include as a approval for the PD if you decide to move forward with it.
Okay, so we can do that with this property and any future properties or anything that's being built, you know, in order to require that. Right?
We can with the PD, definitely. Any future properties on just standard parking lots, we'll need to include that in the ordinance to make it a regular part of our parking. We do need to look at those parking design standards. Those are due, like almost everything else in the code, it's due for update and amendment anyway. So that's definitely worth bringing up at this point. We can start moving forward that as a staff.
Would you please? Thank you.
I have a question. On page 3 of the agreement, it talks about net revenues generated by the excess parking spaces. What's the definition there for excess parking spaces?
It's my understanding that would be this parking spaces over and above their required parking for their project. So
So it'd be the total of the garage.
right, whatever is allowed, whatever is there that's over and above the required parking would then become part of the net revenues of the excess parking spaces.
Over and above.
Made available.
Okay. And also, again, where it's talking about we would receive 10% of the net revenues. You probably don't have this right now, but I'd like to know what, you've defined what the net revenues are, excuse me, but I'd like to know what you anticipate that dollar amount would be.
That is actually an excellent question, and that's something that, as I said, we haven't finalized this agreement. Let me go back and be able to better identify that, and probably better that we go ahead and put that in the agreement.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, I thought we discussed a flat fee versus a percentage. on the
We
board.
did, because we don't want-
said that we did not want a percentage. It's too much work, that we want a flat fee. We want to negotiate a flat fee with them, that this is what they would pay, period, on a yearly, monthly, whatever way basis, versus a percentage, because then it's getting into more accounting and whatever. Because I know we brought that up a couple times here on the board.
But they're also saying it's an estimated 90,000. Well, they're making $30,000 a month now, flat.
Right.
Whether there's cars in that parking lot or not, and I think 90,000 is pretty much shutting the city out of a big revenue source there.
Which is one reason I want to know those numbers, so we can
Right. Well,
have
that's
a better
where-
discussion about it.
Here in the letter.
Right.
Well, and Madam Mayor, if I may, one of the things that
Oh, I don't have the second
staff
page.
would like to bring forward to the board when we finalize the terms and conditions of a contract is what that number looks like. We will explore an opportunity for a flat rate, but also a tiered rate as well, and see what is the better deal. One of the things that we have to be conscientious of is that by them constructing this parking space, this additional capacity, it is alleviating some responsibilities on the city to effectively go out and construct that. If we were to go out and construct a parking garage, we would pay $20,000 a space, and we would be required to maintain it. For the arrangement that they're putting in place, or they're proffering, that they would be the entity responsible for the upkeep, maintenance, liability, all the other elements associated with it. The surface level parking that they have now is unimproved area. So there is going to be a lot more cost on the developer side as well. So when we look at that agreement, there's a lot of other components that we have to talk about. So for us to say that we want to check for $40,000 or $50,000, there's a lot of other elements that have to be considered as part of the agreement as well. And right now, staff believes that it's too premature for us to bring you a concrete number until we find out what the capital costs would be. And of course, we'll negotiate a favorable agreement for the city, but certainly from staff standpoint, the easiest for us is certainly the flat rate. But I can tell you that the other argument will be the cost that it takes to maintain those parking spaces that are open for public use and the liability associated with that. So there's a lot of things that are going to go into this agreement that you'll hear back from the opposing or the party that we're negotiating with. So just some items to consider as we
But that would
still
be
work
part
through
of the
it.
negotiation, you know. We're not, you know, if you're asking for $1 million or if you're asking for 100,000, you know, hey, you know, well, we have these costs, and then we have to understand that when we agree to a flat fee, you know, and I think that's understandable. But we had talked that the cost of doing a percentage and the paperwork and all that was just astronomical and wasn't worth the hassle, you know, versus doing a flat fee.
And that's something that, you know, I think when we look at the arrangement, there may be a situation where the percentage of the revenue share is larger because in essence you're sharing with the risk as opposed to them booking if they were going to pay us $25,000 or $30,000 a year or $90,000 a year. So we've got to bring both those options back for you to consider, but we don't have that information at this particular moment. The intent behind this item is to see on the substantive issues associated with this agreement, does the board conceptually feel comfortable with the terms and conditions and the outline provided, and then we can bring more of a finalized agreement with all the small nuances and intricacies associated with the agreement. But if you didn't have the appetite to move forward with a joint use agreement, there's no point of continuing those conversations. And so we've had our labor attorney look at this, or our land use attorney look at this, staff has looked at this, and so now we're asking direction from the board as to how you would like for us to proceed. If this is something that you still want us to work out and move forward with the potential of coming to a conclusion on the negotiations for something that may be palatable that the board can approve or not approve.
You know, I kind of agree with, I understand what you're saying, but I'm also saying that, you know, before, you know, I would say yes to this, you know, I would like to have things like the charging stations, you know, what are we going to do? Because when you say a percentage of the parking, you know, because the people that are staying at the hotel, they're not going to pay for parking, you know, so that's going to be subtracted automatically, you know, versus saying, okay, we've got a flat fee, this is how much the city's going to take in every year, every month, every week, whatever you want to call it, I don't care. But I think we need to be looking at that as we go through this. Mm-hmm. You know, I think most of us here, and, you know, I'm just talking for myself, you know, think that this is a good idea, but then how do we handle it, you know? But to say, yeah, and start moving forward, then have to back up because we have to look at these other things. You know, why not just have all them up front as we go?
Well, and ultimately that's where we want to get the arrangement, but we needed to see if there was some pinch points based on the document that you've been provided, that if you say, Jonathan, the only heartburn that we have with regards to the document that's being provided is the revenue sharing component, then we know that our time and energy needs to be focused on that. But if there are other aspects, or if it is in essence a non-starter, then we wanted to get your perspective, and that's why we utilize this workshop forum to get direction from the board as to what are the main elements of the agreement that you'd like for us to continue to work on, or things that you think are fine, or things that you just don't like in its entirety. Well,
you know, why? Because like I said, we talked before, and most of us agreed to do the flat fee. So I don't know, I guess what disturbed me was it coming back as a percentage again, when we had already talked in the past about doing a flat fee. So was that just looked over, forgot about? I don't know. That's what I'm
If I could, I think what this was is really the proposal from the developers that related to their terms. I looked at it to make sure it was legally sufficient, some discussion as to the best process to use to get it in front of you, given that there's an encroachment and all of that. So if what I hear you saying is that you really, that's great that they want to do it this way, but that's not the way we want to do it. We want to do it in such a way that we get a certain amount of money on a month-over-month or a quarter-over-quarter, year-over-year basis. Then I can go back to have that conversation with the attorney representing the developer. What may be necessary is for them to run some revenue numbers. So, because the problem with asserting a flat fee right now is you then, if they raise the rates of their parking or, there is additional revenues, you may be losing out. Their risk is that they pay too much money to the city and they can't afford to properly maintain the garage. So, that's really where the rubber's hitting the road. So there may need to be some a determination that everybody's comfortable with if it's going to be a flat fee as to what the basis of that flat fee is. And I think that's something that will take a little bit more work in order for everybody to feel comfortable that that flat fee number is the right number.
But those things can be looked at, if they feel like they're paying too much, we can always renegotiate the flat fee based on, are they paying too much or are they not paying enough? And that can always come back to the table. And it needs to be put in there that way.
In here that it has to be, looked at, maybe every other year or something like that. That being said, that's the pros and the cons with going with a flat fee versus a percentage. Is you come, especially when you're sitting today, and how are we going to identify what that proper flat fee is? That doesn't sound, that isn't, one, unreasonable, or two, make sure that the city isn't getting all the money that it would have received under a percentage. So I think we need to go back to them and have them make a proposal that relates to a flat fee with some basis for it and see where we go from there, because obviously it's in their interest as well for them to be able to move forward in this fashion for their development. And I think it's in everybody's best interest. Parking's always, it doesn't matter what jurisdiction I'm in, parking's always the thing. And that's something that when you have this opportunity to see about moving forward with, it's a good opportunity to try and see what we can't do.
But obviously the parking company has a pretty good handle on it, or they wouldn't have offered the D'Agostino's $30,000 a month. So, they've already got their numbers. They know where they're going, and they know what those parking places are going to do. So it's something that they need to come back to us with, and knowing we want a flat rate, and knowing that down the road it can be negotiated out and readjusted based on the current conditions of the past and the economy and everything else.
Madam Mayor, if I may, one of the things I think the board should also consider is maybe a hybrid formula whereby you have a flat rate, but as increases happen throughout the term of the agreement, that you benefit from those incremental increases. My only concern is if you have an agreement that you're opening up every year, that mutually both parties have to concede to open up. You don't know the dynamics of the players that are going to be involved in the conversation, the negotiations and all that. So you can say that, hey, for the sake of the agreement, we're comfortable with X amount of thousands of dollars per year. And then, on, any increase associated with parking that you receive 50% or 30% or whatever that may be. But we can do some additional research because this type of arrangement is not uncommon, and we can see what other entities are doing, how they're managing that situation, because you certainly want to experience the additional revenue and the growth as things happen, because we know that parking may start off at $2.50 but may end up peaking at $5, and you don't want to, in essence, leave additional revenue on the table if you can. So, but that's something that we can address.
I'd like to make a few comments, if I might. Are you through, John? Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes, I know that we're here today just for this joint use agreement, okay? And I'm not for it at all. I certainly wanted something done on that piece of property. I've lived on that street for 45 years, and I'd love to do something about it. But I've looked at it, and I've read the contract, I've read everything. I'm not in favor of a joint use and an air encroachment agreement between the city and a private developer at all. I just against that type of a situation. I don't think that the city will ever come out on the right end of it. I I looked at the contract and I've read it several times. I think it clearly states what the, if you should go forward with it, okay? I'm not for it, but if we should go forward with it, I think that Julie is right, Ms. Mandel is right, that it definitely needs to go back to the attorneys, because I thought that we were going to look at something today, I guess, that would benefit the city. And all I see in here is what the developer wants and the intent, just the intent for the city of Madeira Beach. And I just ain't for the intent at all. I mean, you either have to see something or the intent can be $25,000 a year or 90. And so even the discussion of, the percentage, versus the flat fee or whatever, I think there's just a lot more. I know that we've had several meetings on this, and certainly the architect has come before us and given us lots of different thoughts and had those 2 neighborhood meetings for the city. But I looked at the package that we got today, and it's not even complete with, and I fully agree that they don't have to put any of the designs or anything like that in it, but I was just curious, and so I thought, okay, I'm just gonna see how many rooms they finally come out with, because it looks like something totally different from the other 2 concepts that we have seen, okay, this new concept. So, and I couldn't even find more than 40 rooms, so, and I know it's, I know it's a lot
I'm still
more.
waiting on the exhibits and some other things from these,
Right.
so
But
I wouldn't say that this was ready for any form of approval at this point.
Okay, well, the other thing is too, a lot of neighbors and a lot of people within the city had asked me what I did think about it, and I didn't say anything. I said, what do you think about it? So as a result of the neighborhood meetings, I asked them to please email Linda Portal and a copy to me if they wanted of what they felt about the project. The biggest concerns that people have are the traffic and are the increased parking. Nobody has really defined, everybody says, oh, we need more parking, we need more parking. But nobody has really defined at what times of the year do we need more parking. We all know we need more parking, you're right. But it's not defined. I think one of the best responses is, where did he say that? Oh, yeah, and some of the other things, I guess, I'd just like to pass along to the commission since this is a workshop. One of the people said the 6-story structure is out of scale with the rest of the village. The design looks more appropriate for a suburban shopping mall and looks out of character. These are things that we've talked about, okay? And I know it's not for us to really get into that today, okay? But these are some of the real concerns that people have besides not wanting that joint use agreement. The water park is definitely, the way it looks now, it looks like Disney World to me from the information that we got today. So just to put it, just to hold the topic off for a minute, I'm not in favor of the joint use agreement, okay, and the air encroachment. I think that it's precluding, our charter says that in order to sell property, we have to have a referendum of the people, and I think that this is simply a diversion from that to be able to build. And it is,
Yeah.
It really is. So let it be said at that. Thank you.
I just don't feel comfortable going forward with a partial agreement that has so many holes in it that we'll fill that one in later, or we'll discuss money later. Let's bring us the whole thing, the way it is.
Well, it's my opinion that, I would think, I might certainly be wrong in this, but we've not met, any of the key figures in this project. And it's my feeling that, I guess, that they wanted to give it to us piecemeal. They want to know that we're going to give them that, the alleyway, okay, before they spend lots more money on it, okay, doing whatever research and stuff they have to do. So and I'm not for it.
Madam Mayor, if I may, the reason that you've seen the bifurcation of the item where you're discussing the joint use agreement versus the development that is being proposed on the site is because it's a quasi-judicial proceeding, and it would be out of order for us to bring the entire proposal to you in one fell swoop. So the reason that Director Portell and staff brought this before you is to see Here's a copy of the agreement. Are you in favor of elements of the agreement? Do you not like elements of the agreement? Are there things that you'd like to see tweaked so the attorneys can go back and make the appropriate modifications and bring you something more palatable for you to consider? Because like the director stated earlier, we can't move forward in the process as far as processing the application for the development if this particular issue is not addressed. The other side is that the developer still has the ability and the rights to develop on both those parcels, and it will be a development that will have some issues that we would have to talk about as far as some expenses that the city would have to occur on the roadway and all that. So there's a lot of moving parts associated with this. So in order to make sure that we stay within the parameters of the law and understand that this is a quasi-judicial proceeding, that we separated the discussion that you're having on the joint use agreement. If you conceptually want to see tweaks and modifications to the joint use agreement and a document being brought back to you for approval or denial, staff can go forward to do that. But conceptually, if the board does not have the appetite to move forward with that, there would be a lot of legal resources and staff time that would be wasted if, in essence, if we brought you something in its entirety and negotiated all the elements and it doesn't get approved. So we brought it here to get your feedback and input before additional time and effort is put into the agreement. And so therein lies where we are. We're only looking at the agreement. You still have time as part of the development agreement or the PD to make tweaks and modifications with respect to the issues that you have heard from your constituents associated with this project. So it's not something by adopting or moving forward with this agreement, all other aspects associated with this development are off the table. No, it's just one speaking specifically to the joint use agreement. All the other things as far as the elevations and the look and feel and those types of things are still items that have to come back before you for discussion and approval ultimately.
Well, I think what I'd like to do now, before we go any further on the board, is open this up for public comment.
Let me ask one question
Yes.
before that. You're the land use attorney for the city, correct?
That's correct.
What is your opinion? Is this a good move or a bad move for the city as you representing the city as the land use attorney?
Well, there's two parts of this. One is from a board business decision whether or not the revenue aspect of this makes sense to you. And that's not as much a legal question as it is making sure that you are getting the benefit of your bargain. But I'm going to put that on the side. As you're looking at this development, and I don't want to get involved in the quasi-judicial parts of it because that would be inappropriate. This isn't noticed for that purpose. You are really saying that you are going to be a participant in allowing this development to move forward by granting this airspace encroachment. Because that, it is right now, if it goes forward as thought through, it would be utilizing property that the city has an ownership interest in, which is, interestingly enough, the airspace over an alley. That is within your rights as a city to hold for the benefit of the public at large. So in looking at this as a holistic decision, if you believe that this is appropriate and the development aspects of this make sense, not the specifics, but the generalities, and you think having additional parking does make sense to the city, then this is not something out of the extraordinary for a governmental entity to do. If you don't believe at this point in time it's valuable to give up your rights over this alley, then I would suggest to you that they need to move forward with a development that doesn't include that portion of it. The deal that they have in here in terms of having an airspace encroachment, given your charter, really is their only option other than going through a referendum. And while I know it is a little bit on the edge, and I did spend some time looking at this, it is legally appropriate to do it this way. So, I mean, that's really kind of the policy legal decision that you're making is, do you want to give up your rights over this airspace for the purposes of allowing this development to go forward?
I don't think it's just the airspace. It's the actual road on the ground.
Well, I mean,
they want that road and they want that part that's ours. It's not just airspace.
Well, I'm just saying in terms of the title to it. The title exists within the city, and you have that right to it, and it is not a right. And frankly, your charter, as it relates to divesting of property rights, is very strong. It's very strongly within your charter that property rights that are invested into the city, in order for you to divest of those permanently, have to go to a referendum, because my first thought when I saw this was, let's do a vacation petition or something like that, and that's not an option without a referendum, and that's a very strong provision of your charter. So I understand what you're saying, they want the road, but the only right you can give up in this process is your airspace rights. The other rights you can't give up without going to a referendum. And it will have a benefit for the developer, and the question for you is, does it have a benefit for you? And it does if you believe that this type of development in your community makes sense and this is the best way to accomplish it. If you don't believe that, then you really should be making a decision it's not appropriate to go forward with this particular agreement.
But what is your recommendation to the city?
It's hard for me to make that kind of policy recommendation. I can just give you the best agreement you possibly can, but it's really a policy decision of yours to decide. And I think the problem is because of the way this has to go forward legally, I think it does make it a little bit harder, because you have to look at the giving up of the rights of the airspace prior to seeing the development in a quasi-judicial proceeding. And so if that's not a decision you're comfortable to make right now, but yet you don't want to give this up entirely, maybe I can spend some time with your staff researching whether or not there's a way to bring those two together a little bit better.
Thank you.
Ms. Mandel, how long would it take you to go ahead and get that other information for us?
You mean in terms of getting back with the developer and
Yes,
asking for them to
yes.
provide it? I mean, I'll go back to my office today and ask for that information.
Okay.
It's a question of whether or not they're going to provide us. And what I would really want to see is what their proposal would be on a flat fee, and then maybe work with Jonathan, making sure the financial side of that makes sense.
Okay.
Because like I said, there's really two parts. It's the financial part of this, which is what are you going to get at the benefit of the bargain of you giving up some air rights and getting additional parking that you're not obligated to maintain and manage, versus the development side of this and whether or not this type of development makes sense in this location.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead and open it up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And so I'm clear on what my marching orders are out here. I know you're going to hear from other folks, so right now it's my understanding that I will get back with the developer to find out some additional information unless I hear anything otherwise.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. We're now open for public comment, and I neglected to open the public comment for the King of the Beach, so you may speak on that item as well if you wish. Yes.
Kathy Bierman, 225 Bogasega Drive. I really would like you to consider going to the people and just asking, should you proceed with this? We have gone out of our way to say no commissioners should take any of the property anywhere without going before us. You were part of that. And I see semantics being used here. I think you're making decisions that are overwhelming. It might be a good project, but I don't think you should make it. I think you should really say to the people, do you want it? Do you want us to spend the time? Do you want us to spend the money? You know, I think they'll come up with an answer, and then you go from there. But I really think morally you have to think about this. This town has gone out of its way to say no more taking away of our property. No more ifs and little corners and little sections and semantical talking. This is not a project that should go forward without people saying yes or no. Thank you.
Does anybody else have a comment? Public comment is now closed. So I think our consensus here is to go forward and just get the information, and then we'll proceed from there.
Well, after all this, I pretty much agree with Debbie on this, that it is going to take our property, and it's a backdoor against the charge. And I sincerely agree with that. And we really need to think about that.
We do.
And the repercussions that we're gonna get from the residents on that. Because that was a charter amendment.
True. All right, well, then we'll go forward and get the information, and then decide where we go from there. Next on the agenda, we've got the ordinance 2019-03.
Madam Mayor,
Pardon me?
may I interrupt you for a minute, please?
Sure.
Before we move on, I would ask the city manager to kind of tell the people that are here and talk about our new thing in the back a little bit, and bring that to their attention, please.
Certainly. The placard back there is the city's mission, vision, and core values. At the beginning of, well, actually in the summer of last year, the Board of Commissioners had a retreat with executive staff and members of the community and went through a visioning session. And one of the things that came out of that visioning session is for us to establish a citywide mission statement, vision statement, and core values. Those values, that mission statement and that vision statement are ingrained in the fiber of who we are as an organization and are utilized for the purpose of evaluating employees, the direction that we choose to move as an organization, and it's something that we memorialize in resolution format. So that is the first sign that we've gotten displayed here on the City Hall property. Those will be present in multiple conference rooms throughout the city, and it's a testament to the leadership of this board and the residents coming together to commemorate and memorialize the things that make Madeira Beach a special community. So we're excited to have that up in our board chambers and up in our conference room. But our pledge to the residents of this community is when you interact with any city staff and you interact with this government, the expectation is that you would receive the services and be treated with the respect, and that we emulate those core values on that sign. So it's not something that we take lightly. It's something that we believe in and we value, and we look forward to continuously making improvements to make this the eccentric, wonderful community it is. So eclectic, yes, not eccentric, eclectic. See, I should have read it before, but nonetheless, it's there, and we're excited to have it posted, and looking forward to continuing making the progress and doing the work that we're here to do. That's the work of the public.
Thank you.
So we are at ordinance 2019-03, meeting of Civil Service Commission. City Attorney?
Yes, this was originally set up as a resolution, and the intent, Commissioner Weinstein can explain a little more, was to limit the Civil Service Commission meetings to quarterly meetings. Quarterly meetings were required by the current ordinance. This is one version of the ordinance. There's also another January 9th version. They both didn't make it in the packet, but this one is here for you to discuss. You also have from the city manager's office a collection, a survey of local governments in our area that do not have civil service boards at all, and that includes Bel Air Bluffs, Reddington Shores, South Pasadena, St. Pete Beach, Treasure Island, Gulfport, North Reddington Beach, Pinellas Park, and Treasure Island. I think I already mentioned Treasure Island. Then we also have from the clerk's office a section of each of the cities of Boca Raton, Fort Lauderdale, Hallandale Beach, Jacksonville, Tampa, and Winter Park. And you'll see how they have set up their civil service boards. Each one is slightly different. Sometimes the civil service board is a non-binding advisory recommendation. Other times they have the final say and can reinstate an employee who has been disciplined or discharged. So you'll see a whole gamut of different ways of handling Civil Service Board procedures and some of the substance that's there. You have some articles from Hillsborough County, which is a bit unusual because Hillsborough County's Civil Service Board was set up by the Florida legislature specifically for Hillsborough County. And they have an executive director, Kevin Beckner, who oversees the Civil Service Board there, and they have a budget. He has a budget recommendation of $1.98 million. So it's costing this Hillsborough County a bit of money to run their system. You also have some law review articles that kind of explore management versus labor. There's always been a struggle in labor law between management and labor. And they are examining civil service systems at a statewide level in Massachusetts, in Georgia. They have done away with civil service. All employees are at will. Texas, similar. And then there's an article that talks about Florida and the Florida experience and explains how Governor Jeb Bush intended to remove all state workers from civil service and make everyone at will. That did not go through the Florida legislature, but they were successful in converting all supervisory positions to at will. So in Florida and state government law agencies, state government agencies, if you're a supervisor, you're at will, and you can be fired without having a civil service hearing. But if you're not a supervisory position, you would still have the ability to request a grievance hearing. Along with civil service disciplinary actions, there are other aspects of civil service and civil service boards and management and labor, and some of them involve reorganizations. Sometimes there's a need if an organization, including a government, has too many employees to let some employees go. That can be very difficult because you're letting them go without cause, just because you have too many people for the amount of work that you have for them to do. So that's very difficult if you can only fire for cause. Also, in reorganizing agencies and governments, the classifications of positions are an important component. And so some of the civil service reform at the state levels in some of these states, including Florida, has been to broadband job classifications to make broader categories. Another aspect of civil service that we haven't addressed or don't seem to have much going on here in the city is testing for employees who are being promoted. That happens sometimes, for example, in fire departments or police departments. Seniority, sometimes the last in is the first fired if there is a downsizing or layoffs to occur. And some governments have seniority and other governments do not have seniority. I think that our Civil Service Board addresses in our charter quite a whole host of issues, and they hadn't been meeting for many years. They have met last year frequently. They did have a lot of work to do. It seems like most of that work is near completion, if not completed. And so this being a workshop, this is probably the appropriate time for you to discuss your thoughts about the direction that you would like the city to go, and realize they really have really three layers of government. One is the charter. The Civil Service Commission is in the charter, so certain things, if you're changing in any aspects of the Civil Service Commission that's expressly listed in the charter, you would have to have a charter amendment, and you'd have to have a referendum for that. There's also an ordinance in our code that deals with personnel and civil service, and that's where you see this ordinance proposal in section 2-127. And the draft in front of you would be for the Civil Service shall hold regular meetings. And then we had blank per blank, whether you wanted to go once per month or quarterly or once per year or twice per year or 4 times per year or 4 times per month. That's all within your discretion and to debate. And then also we say, and shall also meet as may be necessary in order to hear any grievance hearings, which are currently provided by the city charter. So the Civil Service Commission does have to hear grievance hearings. As you know, the Civil Service Commission works in a non-binding advisory role to the city manager, who retains the sole power to hire and fire employees, not the Civil Service Commission. In order to change that, you would have to amend the charter. And I think we brought forward some alternatives, one from the Charter Review Board, one from the Civil Service Commission, and then during prior workshop and prior hearings on the charter referendum, we decided not to place that on the ballot this time. So there won't be anything on the ballot in March. So your debate can focus on those issues.
Did I understand you right? The Civil Service Board, one of their functions and has to be is a grievance board or whatever.
It's in the charter that they would hear grievances, an advisory role only.
My questioning behind it is the fact that most of the people that are on this board are volunteers, and they don't have an employment background, and the laws have changed so drastically over the years, and I just don't think that's the right way to do that. For people that are not, that's not their profession to do it. You know, like human resources or something.
I definitely agree. When I brought this forward, or when I asked the city attorney to start checking on it, it was because our Civil Service Commission has worked very hard and had a lot of efforts, and the staff's worked really hard and had a lot, made a lot of effort. And then the Board of Commissioners has too. And I myself served on our Civil Service Commission for about 7 years in the 90s. And it certainly didn't seem as complicated as it had gotten now. And then one of the first things that came to my attention was that the excellent efforts that were made by the commission to prepare and redo, I believe it was the personnel manual, much of it going through it was all wrong. Okay, I mean, it was just, and it wasn't our fault, it was something that was done 5 years ago or 7 years ago or whatever. And it was not, it hadn't been done correctly. We then decided to do a resolution possibly to help understand the duties and responsibilities, which I know that the city manager might make comments on that later, but to bring in a professional and say, this is what we've got. Am I correct in that, Jonathan?
Yes, Madam Vice Mayor. Through some of the conversations that the Civil Service Board has had, staff has attempted to assist in certain capacities, depending on the nature of the issue. But to your point, with labor law being so comprehensive and so ever evolving both on the state and local level, it is really hard to train individuals that are outside of the walls of this institution to be constantly involved in every element associated with the personnel side of the operations. As the charter and ordinances read, that they are involved in compensation and classification studies, that they are involved in disciplinary actions, they are involved in the drafting of the personnel manual. It's a litany of HR-related items that they're involved in. And our concern from the staff standpoint is if we are not very careful in how we operate and conduct business when it comes to HR, it leaves us susceptible and vulnerable to legal challenges. I've always maintained the position that HR is both the shield and the sword for the organization. And with things changing, we need to be attuned to what's going on, because I can tell you that there's some situations now that because of actions in the district courts that if you take urine samples for individuals that are not public safety sensitive positions, it's a violation of their Fourth Amendment constitutional right, unlawful search and seizure. So if we have an employee that we drug test and it is not a public safety sensitive position and we cannot make that argument, and you then find out that that employee effectively did not pass the drug screening, they can file suit and you have effectively violated their constitutional rights, and then you don't have the sovereign immunity protections because you violated the Constitution. So there's so many things that change on a daily basis when it comes to HR and ensuring that due process is afforded. And so for us as an organization, we are wanting to make sure that the processes that are in place for aggrieved employees to go through is a smoother, cleaner process, but also how does the Civil Service Board coexist with the existing HR function and make sure that we don't put ourselves in a situation where we're being named and our members of our Civil Service Board are being individually named because of a policy recommendation or an action that has taken. So there is a lot of opportunities to clean up and to resolve some of the concerns that have been articulated. And you can see, if you look at the documentation provided by Hillsborough County, it's basically the same challenges that the constitutional officers have communicated to the Board of County Commissioners about the Civil Service Board in Hillsborough County and how it operates and how it functions.
Right, so then we brought forth that resolution, remember, a couple of meetings ago, and it was Commissioner Hodges' comments that we really needed an ordinance. We should not look at anything on a resolution, isn't that right, Commissioner Hodges? Right. So, and I agree with that too. I mean, I thought that this makes it, because in years past, what's been done, things have been done by resolution that were not supposed to have been done by resolution for years. So we're doing it the right way. So the thoughts that I had for it and on this ordinance 2019-03 were really, they were not, well, let me just tell you what they are, okay? Under Section 2-127, it's Article 3, Boards, Committees, and Commissions. How I think this should be worded for really unison and for the employees and for everybody, and certainly for the Civil Service Commission and our city manager, is that the members of the Civil Service Commission shall meet quarterly, or at the call of the chair. No, okay, shall meet quarterly. Period. And it was shown in 2018, for instance, although the codes and everything says that they do meet quarterly, that they met 20 times or more than 20 times in 2018. And I looked at all those different times to see, I guess, or to determine why so much time was being spent. You know, not that it was my right to do that, but I mean, as a citizen, I could do that, you know. So, and I think that quarterly is just fine. I think that because the personnel manual has been completed, I think that as grievances, of course, they will meet more than that. But I think the most important thing is that they are responsible to the city manager, because there's no one else to guide them. And I made this point before. On other, for instance, on the Planning Commission, Linda Portal is their go-to person, okay? And the Planning Commission doesn't just go off and do things by themselves, okay? They're guided by the Community Services, Community Development Director. And I don't think the Civil Service Commission has had that privilege yet. I think they've just gone and done what they need to. And I think that because the city manager is the ultimate administrative leader in our government, that they need to meet, they need to make sure the Civil Service Commission, when they meet, it needs to be a joint, what would you call it, a joint, not agreement, but that the Civil Service Commission chairperson and the city manager should agree on the time to meet, okay, and what the agenda should be. And I think I think it would make things run so smooth to do that, and I'm proposing to do that by ordinance, which is totally logical that we should do that. I did look at a lot of the information also that we were given as far as what communities have those civil service commissions. And then the ones with these big cities, Boca Raton and Fort Lauderdale and Hallandale Beach, this is really not, I mean, I looked at it and everything, but then I went to the Florida League of Municipalities, the 2019 directory, and every one of these cities that are listed in here are, Jacksonville is 891,000 people in that population. Well, we certainly shouldn't be compared with that. Neither should we be compared with Lauderdale, that's 180,000. And the reason that these, I think, were made, I'm not sure who made them, but I think the reason these packets were made was to show us some cities that do have the civil service commissions, but they're not appropriate to us. We have 4,400 people, you know. And these people probably have a lot of union bargaining areas in a lot of the areas. So I just counted that, and I looked at the other information in Hillsborough County, and that's what made me feel that there needs to be that joint effort with the city manager and with the chairperson of the Civil Service Commission. And I thought that was the most appropriate way to do it, is to have an ordinance, which it's just a workshop today, but we can look at the rest of it and see what other things we might want to change on it.
Well, I'd like to know why we chose all these big cities. Does that mean, is it because there aren't any smaller cities?
I think at the time of printing these for language, was get an idea of language as they work toward maybe a possible charter change or something like that. See how other ones did their procedures, regardless of population. That's what
it might make a difference if we looked at cities that are more similar to our size.
Right, but this was printed at a time where we were looking at language changes.
I understand. I still think looking
Yeah,
at
it was
cities.
Responsibilities, okay.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Cool.
Okay, going back to Madeira Beach now. We are Madeira Beach. There's no comparison with us, with anyone else as far as I'm concerned. The Civil Service Commission is set up to take care of the employees if they have a grievance or there seems to be a problem somewhere. This is someplace for the employees to go and talk about it. When we have these meetings, I've not attended any, but Mr. Brooks, you attend the Civil Service Commission
I
meetings?
attend some of them. There is another attorney that attends them
Mr.
regularly. The
Gonzalez?
city manager does not attend them, and the HR currently does not attend them. So it is interesting because you point out in Hillsborough County, they do have a staff that supports even the civil service board there. So you may want to talk about who should attend those meetings. Maybe the city manager or the HR director should attend those two.
Well, I know we've got the citizens, and they do a great job. They do the best they can, even though this may not be their background. They're very honest and very conscientious of our employees. The thing of it is, too, is that we have a labor attorney. Does Mr. Gonzalez come to these meetings?
He does on occasion.
Okay, because, see, and there's times where this is where the law comes in, and you need someone to guide the residents who are making these decisions and trying to work out problems for the city employees. And I think it's real important that they have someone there like that, whether it be you, Mr. Brooks, or Mr. Gonzalez, because you are the attorneys and you know the law, you know what can and cannot be done. And I just feel like that would be the fairest thing, really, for the citizens who are part of the board to help them out. And as far as the meetings go, it's always been quarterly or as needed. And sometimes it is just quarterly and we don't need them any other time. But there are going to be times when we're going to need the Civil Service Board in reference to them regarding a situation with an employee. So quarterly or as needed, as the meeting is called by the chair, I think is very fair. And I think we should continue with that.
Madam Mayor, if I may, with regards to the ability to call the meetings, one of the things that I would like to see the board consider is a provision in there that allows for the manager to also convene the board, because, for example, if we only meet quarterly, probably in the next maybe 30 days or what have you, we have the compensation and classification study that will be completed. We also have the revised personnel manual that will be completed. We're going to be getting into the throes of the budget process, and there's going to be some impacts with regards to some personnel benefits changes as far as retirement, all those different things, and not having the ability to convene the board by, you know, the manager, or if I have to track down the chair or the vice chair to get that, certainly provides a little bit more of some hoops for us to have to jump through. So certainly we would like the ability similar to that of the board that, you know, in the event of something that's pressing, that the manager, in working with the board, can call a meeting to bring items that are pressing in nature to the board to consider, because we want to run those items through the Civil Service Board and then ultimately bring them back for consideration for the Board of Commissioners to ratify it. So.
Can I make another comment too? It's with regards to the labor attorney, what Commissioner Hodges said. I think it's really important that the employee have the benefit of that labor attorney from go, you know, from square one, that it's not the, well, that's where it starts from. That when there's a grievance, and certainly the Civil Service Commission can be a part of that, but can that be a part of this ordinance?
Well, typically, employees who file grievances are not provided an attorney. They have the right to an attorney, but they'll go get their own attorney. Typically, the city's attorneys will represent the city as a whole,
right,
or they'll represent the Civil Service Commission as the attorney for the commission. But the employees go get their own lawyers.
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't finish. I guess I didn't finish that thought, because I did mean that the labor attorney be at the meeting to represent the city. I mean, because isn't that the way? I mean, that's the way it is, isn't it?
Well, right now we don't really have a system, so it's why we're debating this now, so we can figure out what you want to do. So I don't think that.
Well, I think he's an impartial person. I think, and knows the laws.
I think everyone is recognized there's a need for expertise. I think everyone will admit that. There is an HR director who is here, who has an expertise in HR matters, who could serve as staff. Right now, you just send the clerk, and it's a little bit unfair to the clerk because the clerk doesn't do HR. To have the clerk be staff for the Civil Service Commission. So it would be probably appropriate that HR have a representative there. In terms of lawyers, you could have them as an as-needed basis. You could have them every meeting, but do realize it can get to be expensive if you have a lot of lawyers for every meeting. So
I'm just thinking just of grievances.
Sometimes the city is going to be there, and sometimes the Civil Service Board needs an attorney. In the grievance hearing, the employee can get their own attorney, and sometimes we'll show up with an attorney. So it can begin to look like a trial or a courtroom setting. Some other cities and state governments have gone to arbitration. There are other ways of providing due process besides a Civil Service Board. You can do it internally at staff level, like some of these other smaller cities do on the Barrier Islands here. And every city is different, including Madeira Beach is unique and different. None of these cities have all the same boards. They have a different arrangement for boards. We do have the Civil Service Commission in our charter, so unless it's taken out by referendum, we do have a Civil Service Commission. So I think things for you to talk about is perhaps authorizing or directing that the HR attend and that lawyers attend when possible. I don't know what your thoughts and the city manager's thoughts are. The city manager is another charter officer, but that doesn't prohibit him from going to Civil Service Commission meetings on most occasions. You do want to balance that with the separation between constitutional officers and boards. the city manager may not want to appear heavy-handed by showing up at the Civil Service Commission all the time and directing them, or even in grievance hearings. There's pros and cons of him attending, especially if they're making advisory recommendations to him to finally ultimately act on. And again, this area of labor law between management and employees is it's age-old, and it's really about a balancing. So it's where you want to set the fulcrum and how you want to balance that the rights of employees versus the rights of management, and what you're trying to achieve with government, and you know, what goals and objectives you are looking for, or what to improve. So those are all the thoughts that, you know, the legislature and the governor struggled. They had different viewpoints on it, and Democrats and Republicans will argue about whether the balance should be shifted towards labor or towards management. So those are policy debates, like the question that was asked for the land use lawyer earlier. Those are policy debates for you guys to discuss, and we can write it up, however you decide as a majority you want to do.
And Madam Mayor, if I may, I can tell you one of the things as we've gone through the process with respect to a grievance hearing, I think it's, in my opinion, inappropriate for the manager to be present as part of that proceedings, because the recommendation or the findings are going to be provided to that board, to the city manager, for the purposes of making a determination. And so being in that room, certainly just the presence will potentially impact the testimony, the nature of the questions, those types of things. So I'd much rather get the information and then make a determination based on the information that's provided. The other side that we have to look at is, since we are such a lean organization, that if you ask human resources to serve as the staff liaison, the individual who is the human resources coordinator, 9 times out of 10 is the individual that has investigated the situation that has led us to move forward with disciplinary action. So is that really a individual that you, as if I was a member of the Civil Service Board, you're taking testimony from that individual? Will that employee see it as due process when that individual on the HR side has done the investigation and has come to the conclusion that it merits moving forward with disciplinary actions, termination, those types of things? There's other processes that other entities have in place. They have they have predetermination hearing that before termination is rendered, there is a meeting, the department director and that individual with human resources present, and then it ultimately makes its way up to the city manager, and the city manager has time to think about what the decision is going to be made. So there's multiple different ways to do this. I think we can bring back a way to look at the grievance process and to look at the best way so both the board and staff know what the expectations are. But for a lot of folks, this is our first time going around at this, and I do believe in most cases that the board does need that legal guidance to explain what their duties and responsibilities are, and to make sure that they operate within the code and the charter.
Can I add something to that? Okay, and just in line with what you said, and I really wasn't, I guess I was putting it in 2 different departments. I was putting Civil Service Commission 2 specific different duties. One with the grievance, which I don't need to address because I don't really understand a lot of it, but I do think a labor attorney should be present, and he should be the one to guide along the city, okay, not for the employee, but for the city. But the other part that I was looking at is that I had made, and it's with regards to the guidance from the city manager. I had looked at, for instance, 18 or 20 different meetings that I have copies of, okay, of the minutes of the meetings that were done in 2018. And there were some areas in there that just really, really seemed gray, that I think that if the commission had the expertise of the city manager, that would have been helpful in guiding them to the right thing. For instance, there was one time in here that a chairperson indicated that they should start discussing salaries for a certain department, because it was their understanding that that department was the lowest paid. Well, I don't think that that's, I just don't think that was appropriate. I think that the city manager or the HR person would have guided, okay, and said, wait a minute, here's where we need to start, okay? And I guess that's where I was coming from all of this. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's where I was coming from when I was saying that I think that it would be helpful to the commission, to the Civil Service Commission, for the city manager to help with the agenda of those meetings and help with the scheduling of those meetings, of regular Civil Service Commission meetings, which are only going to be 4 times a year unless there's a grievance, and then that takes a totally different scenario anyway. What you giggling at, John? Do you understand what I'm saying then?
I understand what you're saying. It's just how you're saying it.
Well, what I'm hearing is that we should, the HR person should be at the meetings, and that an attorney should be there as needed, and then we have to decide how often. Is that correct?
Correct. And that the ordinance should be prepared, I guess, for our meeting in February, to include, shall meet quarterly as necessary, and the fact that, oops, where's my little notes? Yes, and the fact that the city manager should meet with the chairperson of the Civil Service Commission to determine the agenda for that meeting and to determine the time, and, not necessarily that the city manager is going to be there, okay? But that it needs to be a cohesive effort by both of them to put it together. And that's what I'm asking for.
I think we need to look at the grievance process itself and look into possibly changing that. I know it's going to have to go to a charter amendment, but it needs to, I just don't think it needs to be in hands of people that's not their job. They were never trained in it. They're not up to snuff on the laws. So, like the city manager said, there's a lot of different options on the way we can move on that, on how things are done. So we ought to look inside of that as well.
There are labor arbitrators and labor mediators who understand employment law, and you could have it go to a person who acts more like a judge, someone outside the city and objective, not lay persons. So you could do, you'd have to change the charter, or the Civil Service Board could delegate their authority to a labor arbitrator. So if someone were to be terminated, and terminated may be a difference than discipline. So there's discipline and then there's termination. So both of those could go to a labor arbitrator for a final decision, or for a non-binding decision back to the city manager again. Again, it's a kind of a political decision about how you want to handle that. All those ways do give due process in a different way, but it's all how you would provide due process. Just like some places have gotten rid of code enforcement boards and they have a special magistrate. Some cities have done the same thing, and counties have done the same thing for employment issues. That would be for a grievance, not for a review of a personnel manual, but for a grievance.
Right.
I think we look at the resolution the way it is right here and set it up quarterly.
Ordinance.
No, it's a resolution, is it not?
It's ordinance, it would be an ordinance, yeah.
Okay. And, add the part quarterly, and then if the city manager needs to call it, or if they need to have a special meeting, and then we can look at it further down the road as the city attorney brought up, if we determine that, we'd be better served by having an arbitrator come in or something like that, I think, we can look at that down the road.
I'm not saying it would be better served, I'm just saying it's an option.
Make up your mind.
I'm not saying it's up for you, it's up for you to decide.
Okay.
There's just different choices.
I'm just saying we can look at that further down the road if we need to.
Okay.
All right, well, let's open this up for public comment. Does anyone wish to comment?
Grace Critelli, 13025 Pelican Lane. I am a member of the Civil Service Board, and I come to you as a spokesman for our team. And I've provided to you what we have done since we were reenacted by the board in October 2017. The Board of Commissioners had requested the Civil Service to review and compare salaries between Madeira Beach and other beach communities. At that time, we were told to stand down to staff was in the process of updating the job descriptions. So we were requested to change our hats and our task and to review the policy handbook for the revisions and updates. So beginning on February 22nd, 2018, through October of 2018, it took us 8 months to complete this job. And so you think that's a long time, but it's a very long, complicated policy handbook, and so you had to take section by section. So we completed that task, and the handbook was given to the city manager for review. Once these edits and comments, as the city manager has stated, it will be returned to us to also reconvene for review. The other item was about the labor attorney. He did attend one of our meetings because we were kind of confused on some of the parts of the policy handbook, and we needed some guidance. And so he did appear, and he did help us with some of the specific section of that employee handbook. But as well as being at these meetings, we spent countless hours of our own time at home, each member reviewing each section of this handbook, and so that we were prepared to discuss at the meeting when we got together, not that we were going to, be looking at it word for word. We try to have our thoughts together. Also, our charter committee and the Civil Service Committee met twice together to try to come up with a revision of the charter for the Civil Service Committee. That didn't happen because it was pulled from the March vote to go back to the drawing board and do again a new charter for the Civil Service Committee, which is a very complicated task to do, but we are going to need to hold a meeting again with the Charter Committee to come up with another revised charter for the Civil Service Committee. We also dealt with a grievance that was filed by an employee, which included 2 preparation meetings and 1 grievance hearing, which was held on November 16th of 2018. The Civil Service Committee did their due diligence to review the grievance and provided the city manager with an advisory opinion pursuant to the charter. Again, we were not asking for attorneys to be present at our meetings, but it was come to at certain times that attorneys were present at our meetings to help us guide through a lot of our questions. The future suggestion is to meet with the Civil Service Committee to update our code to conform with the revised charter when the charter gets revised. So we have to revise the charter so that our code can be conformed to that. That's going to be another meeting. My last point is that the Civil Service Committee is following the charter and the code, but there is a change in the position of the Board of Commissioners as to what the role they feel the Civil Service Committee should be undertaking. Until a consensus agreed upon by the board, by the city manager, by the charter, and by the Civil Service Board as to how the Civil Service Board should function and voted by the residents, the Civil Service has only the existing charter and code to follow. So directions to be provided to follow at the request of the Board of Commissioners. The board and team of the Civil Service is ready to do whatever you ask us that you would like us to do. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. All right, so where are we now?
if I may, if I get the direction from the board, is that the board would like to see some modifications to the ordinance that call out that when deemed appropriate, that there will be, when the meetings are scheduled, that there will be a representative from Human Resources that will be present at those meetings, and in the event that legal counsel is needed, that will be available to the board members. Also, the opportunity to look at the existing grievance proceedings and bring forward some potential revisions and recommendations to the board to consider, but that the board would meet quarterly. In the event that there is an item that the board has to discuss, the chair, working in collaborations with the manager, will work together to schedule those meetings and the items that will be presented on the agenda, unless, of course, it's the grievance proceedings where the rules and the duties and responsibilities are outlined in the code and in the charter for the Civil Service Board. We can make those modifications and bring forward a more comprehensive ordinance at your first meeting in February to move forward with the changes if I've enumerated all the desires of the board as part of the discussion that occurred.
I think you summed it up correctly, and we have a consensus for you to bring it back as discussed.
Okay.
Next, we have a status of the Johns Pass kiosk.
Madam Mayor and members of the Board of Commissioners, this item is an update on the Johns Pass kiosk. Since the last conversation that we had with the Board of Commissioners, city staff has worked with Mr. Carrier, with Duell and Associates, about reviewing some aspects associated with the Johns Pass kiosk. Currently, that particular space is being occupied by the Tampa Bay Beaches Chamber of Commerce, as it is an information center for the village and the city of Madeira Beach. Currently, there is some deficiencies with respect to compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. As it relates to city facilities, it is our responsibility and our duty to ensure that our public places and public spaces are in compliance with the Americans with Disability Act when at all necessary, especially when it's being occupied. This is a visible location in the village, and when we did have our survey with individuals in the village, the survey with the local businesses came back that there was overwhelming support to see the kiosk renovated. We also did a digital survey, and the digital survey matched the survey that was afforded earlier. At this particular moment, we have provided 3 options for the Board of Commissioners to consider with respect to the Johns Pass kiosk. I've asked Mr. Carrier to be here to talk about the 3 options, because when we dig into the 3 options, you most likely would ask yourself, why is a demolition of a structure more expensive than making the renovations? And he can provide some more insight. We have proffered 3 options for consideration. Option A is a renovation of the existing structure to ensure that it is ADA compliant. It will be a staff facility. The projected cost for that is approximately $20,000. In the event that we entertain the previous proposals that were proffered by both the Madeira Beach and Treasure Island Chamber of Commerce and the Tampa Bay Beaches Chamber of Commerce, the projected revenue can be anywhere between $2,400 to $3,600 annually. Option B is the demolition of the existing structure with improvements to landscape and streetscape, looking at the cost of about $95,000 and projected annual revenue of 0. The other option is option C, renovation of the existing structure to create a shaded seating structure that is ADA compliant. It's an unstaffed facility, and the projected cost for that is approximately $60,000. Staff is recommending requesting direction from the board as to how they would like to proceed. And at this particular moment, I will turn it over to Mr. Carrier to walk the board through those three options that we discussed associated with the Johns Pass kiosk.
Good afternoon, Al Carrier with Doolin Associates. I'll go through each of the options for you, and if you have any questions, feel free to blur them out at me as I go through these. The first option, as Mr. Evans had stated, was to bring the structure into ADA compliance. I did make a site visit on 124 last week, and I did reach out to a local architect who was very familiar with the building, spends a lot of time in the village, so he kind of had a good feel of what was going on there. The structure itself meets ADA. The door width meets ADA. The interior size of the building meets ADA. What currently does not make it meet ADA is when you open the front door, there's racks with the pamphlets and magazines that block the entrance that narrows down the entryway in order to enter the building. That was one area of concern. The other was there's a desk in there. There's certain requirements for ADA compliant desks. The simplest being they're 36 inches wide, no higher than 34 inches. And there has to be adequate space behind the desk, 5 feet, for a disabled person to maneuver behind the desk. In speaking with the architect, the building would be compliant. Again, relocate the shelves that hold the brochures and remove the desk. Put some other desk, something similar to like what we're sitting at here today, something against the wall if a desk would still be needed. Looking at the building, I was able to look underneath the soffit and look inside the trusses that are there. Everything seems to be in very, very good shape. I didn't witness any leaks in the roof, and overall the condition of the building is very good. The range in prices essentially is up to $20,000 because we included some funds to renovate if you wanted to put a siding on it or change out the lights or even implement some sort of display monitors for some marketing the materials. But the range there is up to $20,000 if you wanted to keep the structure as is.
So Al, you basically, what you're saying, if I understood you correctly, you need to make it ADA for people to work there as well as ADA for the people coming in.
Correct.
So
and the caveat is if you continue to use the facility as is, where people come into the facility. When I was out there, people were talking, asking what was happening, and they had suggestions of opening up the windows and allow it to be like a walk-up where somebody would walk up like to a window, and there would have to be some renovations then. The front window would need to be dropped down to a certain height and a shelf would be put out in front. But depending on how you guys want to operate the building, we can research that a little bit further. But as it stands today, the building's fine. It just needs the interior modifications to the desk and the pamphlets.
Al?
Yes.
What about the ATM machine? They were saying, I remember that distinctly, somebody said that it was not proper access to it because the bench was in the way or something?
Possibly. I did not look specifically at the ATM machine. That's a little out of my bailiwick. Those ATM machines change. If you read the rules for the, and I tried, if you read the rules for the ADA guidelines for ATM machines, there are certain requirements. There needs to be a clear area of like 48 inches by 30 inches behind it. But the actual machine itself it needs to have an apparatus so you can put hearing in, the ability for people to walk up and if they're in a wheelchair, they have clear space for their knees. So I don't want to comment on whether or not the machine is ADA compliant or not. The second option, option B, to be honest with you, this was the hardest option. And does come with the highest price tag. And this is the worst case scenario, and I'll try to walk you through this. The building, the structure sits on 8 columns, and it appears that the building itself that's enclosed was blocked up in between the existing columns. To go ahead and demo that building, there's a concrete slab that would need to be removed. And my thought process was if they went in and demoed the building, there'd be peripheral damage, if you will, with the pavers around the building. So I have an allotment in there of about 2,500 square feet of paver restoration. My other concern is the 8 columns that are there, they look like they were put in with some sort of concrete anchoring system. They may be in the ground 4 to 6 feet. When those come up and come out of the ground, there's going to be also, again, peripheral damage around the area. Not knowing if when the building was built, I looked on the Pinellas County property appraisers. I couldn't tell when it was built and or by looking at the existing facilities out there if there's any infrastructure underneath. So I don't know if there's any gas lines, for instance, or I don't want to alarm anybody, but any communication lines like Spectrum or any fiber optic lines that would be disturbed when those columns had to come out of the ground to demo the building. So I had to include a little bit of extra money in there for the restoration of the peripheral area around the site, and then kind of the open-endedness of hardscape. To put back just hardscape, I included a planter, I included landscaping, irrigation, running electric back up to the area where the landscaping would be. So worst case scenario, I had in there $95,000. My estimate would probably be somewhere between $55,000 and $60,000 to $90,000, depending on how deep the foundations are on the columns and what else needed to happen to remove the structure and restore it.
Okay, Al, I have a question. Going back to the first one, the option A, to renovate it. I like the idea of opening up one side of the building and having a shelf there or a counter where people can actually come up from the sidewalk right to the building and then talk to the people inside. I like that idea, and that would eliminate them from coming inside the building. So you can go ahead and put the desk that you need in there and maybe some shelving for the brochures or whatever else needs to go inside. So the necessity now is that just the people who are going to maintain it will be inside, and then everyone else is on the sidewalk, and they come up to the window and they get their brochures or their information, and then they move on. We could do the window with those
Bahama
awnings.
shutter or something?
Yeah, something like that. And I do believe that that would be more of a friendly approach, because people are a little apprehensive about turning a knob and walking into a building because they don't know what to expect when they get in there. But if they come up to the counter, you know, they feel more free to stand there and ask their questions and do the business they want to do, get their answers, and then move on. And I do believe that would be more efficient than actually having someone come into the office. You know, I think just coming up to the window, like you talked about doing the window, I think that's a great idea. We don't need to put any stools there because we don't want to entertain people for the afternoon, but we want them to come and get their information and then do what they need to do. But I think that would be a really great idea. And then it would eliminate a lot of the work then on the inside, other than, putting a desk in there, building in a desk, and then maybe putting in some shelves so they can stack all the brochures on the inside. I think that'd be great.
I did think of that. My only concern would be, what do you do on a rainy, windy day if the window's open and all the brochures are in there? So I think you need to have a dual purpose. Maybe the window's open most of the time, but if it's a real windy day, still give the people the opportunity to come in to the building and talk to whoever's on staff to get their information or hand out brochures.
That's true too, yes. But then again, if it's windy, you only have the sidewalk, the side that's facing the sidewalk with the awning there too. And that might even protect the inside of the building a little bit too, because you won't have the back of it open and you won't have the door open. So it kind of just eliminates everything to one side of the building.
Certainly.
Great job.
The last option was to demo the structure, leave the roof, the seats, and the slab. Again, this is a difficult challenge to trying to come up with a price, and I'll go through that also with you. Again, the building itself that's enclosed looks like it was blocked in between the existing columns. Some of my concerns were, I don't know how those blocks were attached, if they're actually just mudded in and laid between the columns, or if they actually doweled into the concrete below and then doweled into the columns. So when they go back in and demo the structure to just leave the roof structure, would they have to replace the columns? And then what kind of repairs would be needed to the floor, the existing concrete floor? So I had some allocation of dollars to look at the worst case scenario and try and restore the floor and the columns if need be. Again, going maybe above and beyond, but looking at like replacing the cladding, redoing the ceilings, adding lights, putting in extra electric, and changing out the seating. Worst case scenario was about $60,000. The range would probably be somewhere between $40,000 and $60,000 in my opinion. So with that, if you have any questions, be more than happy to answer them.
Al, you couldn't tell when you were down there on your little survey thing, if all of the posts were already there, okay, when it was it was an upside down boat, okay, when it was the bus stop. And then when they put in that little building, okay, they didn't upset or change any of the posts, I don't think. They didn't. They just simply inserted boards and made, covered it up. So that's why I was wondering what okay.
That would make sense because the columns themselves, you can see where the concrete footing is flush with the slab, and there's an expansion joint or keyway around what looks to be the structural portion of the column, the concrete that's in the ground, and it's separate from the slab. So I would agree with you. It looks like it was like a pole barn, if you will, and they came back in and put the slab in and then blocked up between the columns to form that little 10 by 10 kiosk.
Debbie, when was that built?
I can answer some of that.
Good. I knew between the two of you, you'd figure it out.
Critelli, 13025 Pelican Lane. I work on that building. I did the concrete work. That's why it has an expansion joint. On the block part that they put on the column, this structure was there, and when we inquired the property for John's Pass, so they're both royalty at the time, we're supposed to put a bathroom eventually there, but they decided to put a bathroom on the existing building now. So they decided to close that and make a welcome center. But the posts were there, but it was a concrete slab there too, but we had to remove it and make a little bit thicker the concrete there. So, and the block attached to the wood columns, it's got wall ties. So you know what the wall ties are, right? Yes. A piece of steel that they bend, that's nailed to the wood and goes to the block to hold it to don't go back and forth. But the structure was built very well. It's a very well building there. It's still standing, and the posts are very deep. We always got a yard of concrete for each post because those days they were worrying about hurricanes. That's it. Thank you.
What year was that? 1987. 87?
It was 87 when
It's when right after we bought the property on the board royalty was done there.
Thank you.
There's one caveat I'd like to add is if you decide to keep the structure and put improvements, you're going to also have to address the 50% rule for FEMA. So the value of the structure, whatever that may be, and I couldn't tell because there wasn't on Pinellas County's website to give me any indication, but you can't exceed improvement value of 50% of what the structure is valued at today. So that's something to look at as we move forward.
Well, we got 75% of the people said they wanted it to be renovated, yet 66% of the people said they've never gone there. So, I don't have any clue as to resident, business owner, what the ratio is there. I've always been to tear it down. It's political. The building's political. It's become political. Because the two chambers, everybody wants it. And the projected annual revenue of $2,400 is pretty much non-existent. It's never happened since I know of 2007 for sure. We've never gotten more than $12 a year off of it. It's $1 a month, that's what it's always been. And I just think I'm actually tired of messing with it. I'd like to see it go away, make it back a bus stop again, somewhere they can sit out, people can sit down, eat ice cream in the shade, and let's just move on. This is just old, and it just seems like it just keeps getting brought up year after year after year.
Well, the world is transitioning away from printed materials. And so that makes the kiosk less and less useful for that reason. I mean, everybody today has a phone, and you Google where you want to go. And,
exactly.
You know, look up
You can go
maps.
to Jones Pass Village Association and get a map. You can get the whole thing on there.
And there, you know, we can still have wax there and things like that. But I find it hard to believe that it's going to cost $60,000 to just take everything down but the roof.
We also looked at the $20,000 just to bring it up to ADA. So it's going to cost us another $20,000 if we do any landscaping around it, you know, anything, any improvements around it. And we're not. Why would you upgrade something that we're not going to do the outside around it too? So now you're getting in the same ballpark of just making it go away.
And I agree, it's going to continue to be a political discussion about who's going to run it.
Right.
Forever.
It is.
I think it's important that we keep it. We need it. We need it in Jones Pass. If you talk to the merchants down there in Jones Pass, they like it there too. I've been down in Jones Pass and I've seen people go inside to get the information that they're looking for, whether it just be another tourist attraction here in town, a restaurant, or just general information about the beaches or anything. And I think it's important that we do have someone in there so they can do face-to-face talking with the people when they come in there. I mean, that's important. And we have no other advertisement. The Chambers does the job for the advertisement for the city, and I do feel like it's very important that we keep it. As far as $20,000 goes, I feel it's well worth it. Well worth it to renovate it, bring it up to date, and I think once it's renovated with some changes, maybe to the outside, like I said, with opening up that one side, you'd be surprised at the people that will be using it. And as far as the 67% that say they're 66% say they never use it, well, that's probably residents. They know where everything is in Jones Pass. But you get the tourists down there, and they don't know where different stores are, or they might ask about a special restaurant, or maybe they're looking for the tea shop, whatever, spices and tea. I mean, these are the places that they like to go for the information and get it. And I do think it's important, and it should be maintained by the chambers.
And Madam Mayor, if I may, with regards to the $20,000 and the other fees that are included in this memorandum, it's staff's opinion that these fees would most likely be a turnkey solution that effectively you would be able to address the landscape, any hardscape, all those different things, painting, etc., and still probably have some cost or some savings left over associated with the project. So these numbers are making sure that we don't overexpend because we didn't want to provide a lowball number. But I think, and the engineer can provide additional insight if necessary, but we believe that all the concerns with respect to landscape and, you know, additional improvements maybe on the curb or what have you, or restoration of the pavers, and that should be able to be included in the costs that have been provided. In addition to the projected annual income is based on the request for proposals that we received from the two chamber entities that submitted documents for the board to consider before we started making the conversation or entertaining the conversation about the other options associated with the kiosk. So that's basically information that staff extracted straight from their proposals.
I don't understand on option C why it talks about ADA compliant if we're just going to have a roof there.
I think it's because of the seating area, making sure that folks can be able to maneuver in that covered seating area, because you still need to have the appropriate clearances and the appropriate elevations and ensure that the topography is not, you know, off. So you still have some
But that really shouldn't add that much to the cost, if anything, because you're just going to put seats there. I mean, you have to be aware of that, but I mean, it shouldn't add to the cost.
That wouldn't add very much, anything to the cost. If you're doing a project to begin with, now it's going to be part of the process, is to make sure it's AD compliant. I think it was just there for clarification, that, you know, we're going to ensure that it meets ADA, because what's there now may not meet it, the seating that's there now, because they're so close together, they don't have adequate room to maneuver.
Okay.
Mayor, may I make a comment? Okay, I'm for option C, renovation of existing structure to create a shaded seated area at that 60,000. I think it would be very appropriate. I think it'd be a great use of the property. I think that sometime in the, I think it's important for certainly for the chambers to have presence in the village, but I do think that that is the chamber's, responsibility to get that, to have that responsibility to make that happen for them, okay? I think that maybe sometime in the pie in the sky future, and just made me think about it. I think that old bell tower would be great to make that a building. make that a chamber one day, or make that something, because it serves, a little purpose now. But that's at another time. We'll discuss that another time. But I'm for C.
All right, let's open it up for public comment on this item. First.
Guy Critelli, 13025 Pelican Lane. I really don't say I want to see that gone. In a way it's good, in a way it's bad, and it might be worse bad than good. I used to be in the Chamber of Commerce for 19 years. I was board director and so on. And when we have a brochure inside or we send the brochure to Almerton Road, Hotel House, or wherever, we have to pay a spot, $350, I think was the time, or $275 per year. So if the chamber now can get the people that want to put the brochure in their place and pay a fee that they offset, maybe pay $6,000 a year to the city, or $7,500, whatever for the spot. It's a nice spot there, regardless. It's a kind of an attraction to people. People, they already know where they go. But if they don't go their way, if the chamber can make this agreement to say, well, maybe we can go and find somebody out there that they can pay this money for the yearly dues and keep the little building there for an attraction, and spend the $20,000 and beautify, and maybe later on there is other plans that I want to mention today, what could be done there, because it could be something good eventually. We need a more bathroom on Madeira Beach. That could be an extended to bathroom right there, and I think it's a great idea if we take the building for the Board Realty and make a parking lot there. The building started to deteriorate too. We got to consider that too, how much money we spend on the Board Realty, and the city we pay for. Taxpayer will pay for. We make an income, but how much income we get after expense. So the little building, it's up to you, commissioner and mayor and everybody to decide. But I put in my opinion, if they can get people there like we used to have, they pay so much a month to have a little folder there and do the brochure, and they come up with a formula that they can pay the city so much money a year, maybe they can stay there. Thank you.
Hello again, Missy Hahn, Treasurer Island Madeira Beach Chamber of Commerce. Just a couple of remarks, and let me state for the record that I totally agree in some points and disagree with others, but I will respectfully disagree. I think the businesses And I know that they've been polled, but if you ask them on an individual basis, they absolutely want someone there to answer the questions, to represent them. On the commission, you have to listen to your residents. And perhaps the residents don't understand as much as we think they do that the businesses are the ones that pay all the taxes, so we as residents don't. And we got to keep our businesses happy. As far as the things changing on the phone, absolutely agree that we don't have the traffic that we used to, but the traffic we have now is different because, and I can use myself just coming back from vacation. I could look up on my phone where I wanted to go, but I sat down with the concierge and said, when you're off, when your mom's in town, where do you take her? So that personal contact is so important, especially in this day and age of technology. Sponsorships, we had the kiosk on at Treasure Island. I agree with that there are people out there that want to be part of the community. That is an option. I would love to tell you it's not political, but maybe you as commissioners don't look at that political side. That's between the chambers, and the best person or the best organization that you feel should run it. So I don't want you to think from our part, because I think that both chambers agree that it needs to be there. That is not the question. So please don't take it like, well, this one will be upset or this one will be. That has nothing to do with it. It's just important to have a person there to answer the questions and how they do it. Perhaps Johns Pass Village Association takes that over. But I think the person there is of utmost importance. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak on this matter? Public matter?
I'd like to comment on it. You know, I'm kind of looking at this at three different ways. Number one is the cost and what it's going to cost the city to do it. Number two, having a person there or not having a person there. And, you know, and I see on here that, you know, the bid said 2,400 to 3,600. You know, I've had a lot of rental properties. I've never had somebody come to me and tell me what they're going to pay me. I've always told them what they're going to pay. You know, so it's, I don't understand this 2,400 to 3,600. You know, my thing is, I say option A, because then we keep somebody there. Number two, it's the least expensive, and if we could get $5,000 a year versus $3,600, it's going to pay for itself in 4 years. So that's, and then from there, in 4 years, we look at it again after it's paid for itself, and you know, determine at that point, do we want to continue to do it? Do we want to tear it down? How we want to do it? That's kind of how I looked at the whole thing when I was reading this. So that's all I have to say.
But you left out the one component of when the chamber comes to you and said, we don't have the money, charge us $1 a year. That's what's happened all the time.
Once again, you know, if we're renting it, then we tell them if they can't handle it, then we find somebody else. That's kind of the way I look at it.
Public comment is now closed. Any more discussion?
One last point. I think whichever way we vote on it, you know, at the board meeting, then at that point, then we have to send the city out to get bids to do this, you know, and figure out exactly where we're going to go. So if we pick option A, B, C, so we say, okay, option whatever, you know, now go get us the bids, the actual bids on what it's going to cost. So, you know, and then come back, and if they're in line with what Al comes up with, then, you know, then that'll tell us a lot more. But if Al's numbers are way out of line, if the 20,000 is 30,000, if the 95,000 is 20,000, you know, then we have to relook at it.
Madam Mayor, if I may, also the number that was provided as far as projected annual revenue, that's just based on the proposals that were offered. There was no negotiations that occurred because we had discussions with the board about deviations from the existing concept that we had in place. So if it's something that the board says, you know, as part of the, you know, program, we want to see something where, you know, it's $400 a month or $500 a month to, or whatever it is to get to that that number that the board collectively thinks it's worth the investment. That's something that worst case scenario in the negotiations that we can put on the table. And if it's received and the entity is willing to do that, then, you know, we can certainly cure that. But it is certainly something that can be negotiated. That was just extracting the information straight from the proposal, not having a conversation with any of the chambers of commerce about the possibility of, you know, instead of X amount of dollars a month, we're more looking for Y.
Well, I think we've kind of covered.
Beat a dead horse.
Yeah.
We have. This is how many times we talked about it in
10.
the past 2 years.
10?
Well, at least I have. I dream about it. I was actually going to ask you guys if I can move into the kiosk.
We did start talking about it last month.
But you got to meet our rent requirements if you move into it.
They're going to charge a lot of rent for you. Well, we need a consensus, and I would choose option C. So if I understand it right, we do have a consensus to go with option C.
No, we got to take it to the next meeting and vote on which one we want.
Well, I know, to go forward
Oh, okay.
and vote.
Right.
So there's a consensus for the board to move forward with renovating the existing structure to create a shaded, seated area. And I can work with Mr. Carey to put that item out for a competitive solicitation and get those numbers back and bring it back to the board for consideration. Is it also the board's desire for us to provide notification to the entities that are, well, the entity that is occupying the space to inform them that the board has made or came to a consensus that they would like to move forward with having a seated, shaded structure there, and that they're no longer going to allow for somebody to occupy, so provide them adequate notice so they can effectively vacate the area.
Well, yes, but I believe they probably already are aware of the decision. But nevertheless.
But we just certainly need to put it to them in writing.
Well, and while this is just a consensus to go forward with option C, there's no guarantee that that will happen.
What do you mean? Why not?
Oh, because we haven't voted on it.
Because we haven't voted on it.
Okay.
I mean, that's the reality of the situation.
But you're providing direction to staff to move forward with the competitive solicitation process and then bring you back that proposal. And we will inform the entities of the board's decision, and effectively when the board does approve the option that comes before you with the cost, if you do approve that at that point, then we can initiate the notification requirements.
Is it 30 days notice because there is no lease?
I have to look at the language, but I think you may be right, Vice Mayor, but
there is no
I'll look
lease.
at it.
All right. Going forward, we have special events and application permitting process. Director Hatch.
Good afternoon once again. What I have presented here is the special events ordinance as well as the fee schedule. There's only one significant change compared to the last time that we reviewed it. I went through and made adjustments based on the board's recommendation in our previous discussion. And then we have added an alcohol events management fee. It is a proposed idea. We did have discussion with the board as far as the city serving alcohol at events that were on our property, and trying to take control of that when the opportunity presents itself. With discussions with our insurance company, there were issues presented with that, the assumption of liability, staff training, staff time commitment to serving alcohol at events on the weekends or at nights, or beyond the normal working hours of the staff. And this is an idea and a concept that I think may meet in the middle as far as what we're looking for, and allow for a more thorough review of the alcohol service at events, as well as make sure that the city is still compensated for the allowance of it on property, the assumption of risk, the staff time, that sort of thing. So Just to go through that on page 207, I can explain that to you guys really quick, and then we'll follow up with questions if you have those. So on 207, item C at the bottom, we've put together an alcohol event management fee. I've discussed this with a couple of different departments. And basically, depending on the size of the event.
We have no page numbers.
Yeah, so where do you go, page 207?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's going to be in the fee and collection procedure manual.
Okay.
Excuse me, which one?
And the fees and collection procedure manual, which should be the last portion of that packet. It would be there's page 8 on that one. Not sure if you guys have that in your packet.
Okay, page 8. Thank you.
There at the bottom? Okay. So item C at the very bottom, the alcohol event management fee. Basically, we reviewed the size of events, event 0 to 500, projected attendance, a $250 fee for the alcohol management fee. From 501 to 1,500, that number is $500, and then 1,501 plus would be a $1,500 fee. And in the event an organizer chooses not to pay this fee, that is presented to the city as an opportunity to serve the alcohol at the event. The way that would be done, and the way that I've, in my discussions with other cities and other event planners in this role, is that what they do is, it is essentially, I guess, sourced would be the word for it, but it is sourced out to a 501c3 organization. So as an example, if we were to have an event out here, I would call a local 501c3 and say, are you guys interested in pulling the permit, securing the insurance, and selling the alcohol for the event, beer and wine or whatever, for an event. And then in that particular instance, they've typically done, what I've seen is they make a donation back to the rec center or back to the city while keeping a portion of the revenue from that event. So they would sell alcohol, donate the money back to the city, and keep a portion as a fundraiser. So you present it to them. Our insurance company was actually keen on this idea because it creates an additional level of separation in the instance with insurance if there were any issues related to the alcohol service. But at the same time, it also ensures that we are aware of the group that is doing it. They would still, they would handle the alcohol, they would handle the taxes, make the donation back to it, and we would still have the ability to oversee.
Jay, explain that again. I kind of got lost in there.
Okay. So, for example, say we're going to do a beer festival. We just decided we're going to do a beer festival, and we want to sell alcohol for the event. Well, the city is going to help organize or if the city were to organize the event, but we wanted to do alcohol, rather than the city pulling the license, we could have the Booster Club for our Babe Ruth organization, or we could have a local nonprofit that handles animal adoptions, or somebody that's looking to raise money, and they would handle the alcohol portion of the event. They would basically secure the alcohol, manage the sales on the day of the event, manage the staffing, pull the insurance for. They would also, the city would pull insurance, but they would also pull insurance to make sure that they were covered, and then at the end of the event, they would make a donation back to the city. It's whether it's a predetermined, agreed number, or just hey, we're feeling generous. You could keep 10% or 20% or whatever, but it creates that next level of separation in the insurance and the liability portion of the event. It also decreases the amount of manpower that the city would have to commit to the event and to that portion of the event. But it creates the opportunity for it to happen at the event without dedicating so much of the city. So
if they had an event and they don't want to spend the $1,500, then there would be no alcohol at the event.
Well, they could present, the city would have essentially first right of refusal. Okay. If they said, hey, we want to have alcohol in the event, but we don't want to worry about it, they would allow us to secure a 501c3.
If we say no, then there's no alcohol at the event.
We could, yes.
Okay.
So, this would give us the opportunity, though, if we have a 501c3 in town that is looking for a fundraiser, we could say, hey, this is an opportunity that's popped up. If your organization is willing to go through the whole procedure to assist this event with alcohol sales, then you could do so. And then also, typically there's the donation portion back to the city. So it's, we'd have an agreement with the group.
Now, when you say the event of 1,500 people, now, is that
per event, per day? If it's a 3-day event, is it $1,500 per day, or is it $1,500 for the entire event if it's a day or if it's 3 days?
My thought would be for the event, because this is covering the
Per event.
per event, yes. And the intent of this is, in discussion with our insurance carrier, we couldn't necessarily just say, oh, well, that's a large event, we're just going to assume risk, because there are fees attached to insurance. Like if you were to pull out an individual event policy for that, there are fees that are attached to it. But based on this, if you're going to have more than 1,500 people there, there's a guarantee that myself, Director Patel, and other members of the Sheriff's Department, we're going to have to convene a couple times to discuss the event and ensure that all the correct policies are formulated. You know, if it's an event with 0 to 500 people, that could be a phone call or it's just a quick meeting. But if we're looking at 1,500 meetings or 1,500 people, we're looking at multiple meetings where we're having to sit down and discuss this and follow up and everything. So this is, for us, it's to pay for that staff time, and also, you know, there is kind of the idea that if we're going to have an event, we want to make sure that we're getting involved in it somehow. So,
How do we put this in place that it can't be waived, period?
well, any request of waiver of fees is coming to the board. That's already in this policy. Any special event fee waiver, and I believe we were discussing.
Put it at the bottom of that. Why can't you just put it at the bottom of that? If you wanted to, just put, this fee will not be waived.
And that's kind of what I wrote on it.
Well, there is a discussion, I believe, that we were going to have, that there was going to be a benchmark for the city manager have the ability to waive fees, and it's not going to be at this point.
I saw that in here also. On 42-19, issuance of special events permit shall be contingent upon the city manager's determination. You know, and I assumed, which is probably wrong with me, that gave him permission to waive things in here. Am I wrong, or?
I think, as you read it, I think it's specific to the permit. I don't think it's realistically the cost associated with it. But with regards to the comment about the alcohol event maintenance fee, I don't think you can put a prohibition in there that's saying this fee cannot be waived, but I would have to defer to the attorney, because what you're effectively doing is you're binding future boards, and you realistically can't do that. Now, that you can say, obviously, that cannot be waived by staff, and that would have to be something that comes before you, but I don't think you can put language in there that says, you know, that you can never waive it.
How would you bind a future board when all the board has to do is redo the fee schedule? I mean, that's all you'd have to do is bring.
But that's implied. But if you put a specific prohibition that says that this fee can never be waived or what have you, the language realistically, it doesn't hold water from the standpoint is that a future board can effectively modify and change it. So by putting it in the ordinance, you just have to go through the legislative process. Now, if you wanted to make sure that it cannot be waived by staff, you can certainly do that. But as far as putting that, you know, it can't be waived, you know, it in essence, it can be. It just would have to be an action that the board would have to take, you know.
Then at a minimum, I'd like to see it cannot be waived by staff in there.
Well, maybe I misunderstand this, but it says a person or organization seeking fee waivers of any kind for a special event must present to the Board of Commissioners for approval.
Right.
So why are we discussing it if that's what they have to do?
Right, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the only additional comment I believe we discussed is if we were going to do and it obviously wouldn't apply to this fee, but if we were going to do for example, I believe it was probably 5-6 months ago, we had an event where they had the $100 application fee, and they said that they didn't have it, and it was something they'd done every year, and they lost their nonprofits. There was just a whole lot of stuff. But basically, they ended up paying it anyway. But the whole purpose was they brought that in front of the board to waive a $100 fee. So we were going to discuss a potential benchmark for the city manager's authority of $1,000, just spitballing. But with the intent of if somebody says, hey, I want to waive my special event fee, and that's the only fee that they're gonna incur, there's no hard costs or anything else, then we would rather not, and this is what brought all the special events to the board so many times, we would rather not have to cover that every time.
And Madam Mayor, if I may, if the board is to put that policy in place whereby the manager can waive, my recommendation would be to keep it under $1,000. I think anything above that, you as a board should have the opportunity to, because I think if you leave it open-ended or you say it's 5,000, I just think it leaves it, really nebulous. I think, hey, if it's over $1,000, it's got to come before the board for consideration, but it's ultimately whatever the pleasure of the board is.
That's where we really started off last year, if you remember. It was the special events application, or the special events was just about in the hands of the city manager. And it was the city manager who helped us and walked through it and said, no, I shouldn't be in charge of that. The board needs to make those decisions. So that's where we came up with this. So that's why I was just going to ask you if you'd go back to Article, it's actually the first page, Jay.
Okay.
And thank you very much for doing this, because this was just really long-winded. I was really excited to see it. Anyway, under Article 2, Special Events, Section 4216, down there under 3, should it, or am I being too picky, should it not say any temporary activity or fee waiver which may require the approval by the city manager and or the Board of Commissioners?
I agree. I think the board needs to know about every single one of them, because
that's where we got.
Because then we don't get stuck if, some 501c3 comes up here and they didn't get theirs, but this person did. We just need to know what's going on across the table.
So do you think that would be appropriate to put that? I would like to see that wording in 3.
But I guess the one thing is if, for instance, Habitat for Humanity calls and they said we want to do a community build on this day, and it's their fee in essence would be under X amount of dollars, we would really have to convene the board to be to do that, and so that's what we're trying to. But it could quite possibly happen. When we say it doesn't happen, invariably tomorrow somebody's going to come in and ask about it. That's just how the nature of it is.
If I could provide an example of this, and it's just an example, we haven't waived these fees for it, but for example, the churches that do Easter services, there's one where they do an Easter service in the park where without telling us they could just convene on their own, but what they've done is they followed the process and they've paid the $100 fee and then $100 for I believe trash cans, or I forget off the top of my head, but it was one of those. So not necessarily a church, but if another organization were like, hey, we're just going to gather in the park, it's not going to affect anything. There's ample parking, there's all this other stuff, there's already trash cans there, or we're going to have a birthday at a pavilion that's first come, first serve, but it ticks one of the boxes in there. That comes down to us sitting down and actually looking at it and go, well, technically, according to this, it does say there's an application fee. Are we going to charge somebody, the $100 for their 501c3 to have a gathering that necessarily is, they were just trying to follow procedure and do things the right way, but, anyway. So it's one of those situational bases, and obviously we would have our own internal, level. We're not just going to look at every one of them and go, yes, no, because then we do create the inequalities that you're concerned about.
And what you can put in some language is that any fee waiver that the city manager executes is to be filed with the city clerk's office, or provide, and then at that point, the city clerk can distribute that to the board, so you have that for the record or what have you. So it's not something that is, there's no effective checks and balance, but we just don't want to have a situation where you're seeing the small things that we deem to be a community, the betterment of the community, that we're trying to convene the board, because a lot of the nature of a lot of these events, they do kind of happen sometimes last minute as far as the event organizers and planners and those types of things. It's the small ones. Yeah, I think, if it's the board's pleasure, a dollar amount to say not to exceed $1,000 or $500, whatever the board's pleasure is.
$500 would suit me.
And just to give you guys an example, for this right here, the this alcohol management fee, if somebody said, hey, I'm gonna have less than 500 people on property, but I'm gonna have alcohol, well, we do have the requirements that you have the sheriff's department. And we have other requirements to have alcohol at events. It's really not a fee that, even if we wanted to, we wouldn't be able to waive it.
Right.
And I know that's a concern, but it's so many other checkboxes and requirements that wouldn't allow for it.
Jay, I have a question, and you might have already answered it, and it went right over me, but when you got the fees for the alcohol event management fee, where did you get them from?
To be totally honest, this is essentially a newer concept, because I've bounced back and forth conversations between other cities. They either approve your event and sign off on your alcohol thing and move on, or they look at you and say you can't have alcohol, or it's either approved or they move on. There's the city of Clearwater. I've had more conversations with them. There's some stuff bouncing around. They're actually via my phone conversation today, they're going through it further because their policy that they were using isn't as clear as they'd like it to be as well. So.
Okay, well, but I meant the money amounts.
Yeah, it's assumed staff time.
Okay.
Staff time, liability, a number of things.
Okay. As long as we're not losing on it.
I remember I presented these numbers just to the insurance agent, and they said, if we were just to charge this just for the assumption of risk, she said that those numbers were actually high. She said, do include staff time, because you're going to have, I'm on the phone with her once a week now talking about these things. So she said it would be a good idea to do that, and I was actually excited about it, wants to know how it goes, so they can potentially encourage other cities to do it as well.
One of the things that we also want to look to modify in our special events process is that there is, in the permit process, it says that you are to utilize Pinellas County Sheriff's deputies to provide law enforcement services for your event, especially when there is alcohol present, but there's no explicit language or policy that says that. So one of the things we wanted to change in the ordinance is providing that language so there's no dispute when somebody says, well, where's the policy to back it up? And then we say, well, there's no policy, it's an unwritten rule. So we want to see if the board has any issues with regards to staff putting that item in the policy to state that you have to utilize Pinellas County Sheriff's deputies when there's alcohol present at your event.
Go for it. That's a good idea.
Okay. And I think is the number 500? I know it.
500.
It's fine.
Okay.
All right, I'll open the floor for public comment. There being none, it is closed. So,
I think he has direction.
right.
Yep. The next item is the block party.
Yes. Okay. And before I get started, Will is here as well in case anyone has any questions. So we have received an application for the 4th annual Med Beach Block Party in Madeira Way. With that in mind, we pulled staff in and had a meeting with the organizer for this event that has been applied for. A permit at this time has not been issued, but we have continued through the process up to this point. Upon receipt of the application, we did note a couple of issues or concerns that were brought up last year. And in our conversations with him, we ensured to make sure that these were solved moving forward as the plan. Previously, it was a 2-day event with an overnight road closure. This year, he without any staff direction, applied for a single-day event anyway. He is looking at Sunday, March 3rd. Last year's event also had a complete road closure and restricted access to public right-of-way on Madeira Way and the businesses. This event this year will not do that. I'll admit that was an oversight on my part when we reviewed the application in previous years, and something we are going to ensure is not the case this time. And then the third thing, that in my step back, the road closure that is intended for the event this year would be very similar to the market, barrels, cones. There would be public access right-of-way throughout the event, so if you wanted to cut through Madeira Way to go to the beach or wherever you would like to go or shop the businesses or whatever, there is access. And then lastly, the excessive noise produced by the size and scope of the audio production. Our discussions with Will is that this, the size and scope of the audio production would be toned back this year. They had a larger name band that had requirements, and he basically has assured us that this is something that we would pay very much attention to and ensure that it is not outside the realm of good neighbor policy. And then the last thing is we discussed about shutting down music at 8:45, knowing that the sound ordinance is at 9 o'clock, and then our discussions with the sheriff's department and the off-duties will ensure that that is adhered to, both from the event organizer as well as the police that are at the event. So we just wanted to open up for discussion and ask questions, having concerns.
That's huge.
Yes, I had some questions.
Okay.
I was looking at the application. I know this has got to be wrong, but I don't know what the right answer is.
The attendance?
Yeah.
Yeah. He's not, I don't believe he's going to
71,000
have.
people?
Yeah.
Okay, what is the anticipated attendance? Is it 7,000, 1,000?
71,000 in attendance?
Probably supposed to be 1,000 people in attendance.
Okay, I'm sorry, it's not, that's less than 1,000.
Yeah.
That's what, it's a less than sign.
Thank you.
Have kids.
Well, I did look at it. I thought, wait a minute. And is this the fourth annual? I thought it was the second.
Correct, it's actually the fourth. The very first one was just a parking lot party, which we still pulled the permits and still served alcohol, and then there was the official one where we closed down the whole entire street. And then last year, which was a 2-day event, and then so this year would actually technically be the fourth year.
Okay, and my other question was when is the market day in March?
It is the 10th.
The 10th.
Yes, it coincides with the citywide garage sale.
Okay, so you're going to have 2 Sundays where Madeira Way is going to be
correct,
blocked off, 2 Sundays. Has there been any consideration, or has anybody thought about maybe having it in Rock Park?
That's the appropriate place for it to be.
Right.
What
A lot of
happened?
people mentioned it to me, that's why I'm asking you.
Does anybody forget the traffic issue that this caused last year? I mean, it was horrendous. I had so many people coming up and telling me it took them 25 minutes to get home from Publix. You know, I'm totally against blocking off the Deer Way any more than 4 hours the market's there.
Actually, the traffic wasn't.
Traffic
wasn't do anything towards the block party. It was the first good day after 3 days or 3 weeks of.
You don't know that that's not going to happen again.
We have a King of the Beach that has 6,000 attendants. So somewhere between 6,000 attendants, and there's no sort of type of congestion like that. We had at max each day 600 people there. That traffic had nothing to do with the block party. It had nothing to do with the close of the street. It was just a natural event of occurrences that happened. Unfortunately, we couldn't help it that it was an 80-degree day when we suffered, 3 weeks of 50-degree weather.
Well, I wanted to ask you, you said the intention of this is to bring business into.
Correct. That's why I agreed to make it a free event. Being that these events aren't free, they cost a lot of money, and there's a lot of organization that goes into them. But now with the new development of the Madeira Way Association, talking with a lot of the other business owners, we need something to draw more people here. Right. And the block party draws a substantially more amount of people than the crafts fair does, that the Madeira Way fair does. So that basically would what I'm kind of hoping that it turns into is kind of like the Madeira Way party, for the association, so we can really build it. So this is our party. It's always been our party. The only reason why we had to charge for it was because it cost a lot of money for the bands and the productions and then the insurance and then the alcohol sales and the cops and trash cans and the porta potties. Everything, it starts building up. It's a great event. Everybody that came to the event that supported it had a great time. You can ask the police officers at all 4 events. We've never had any incidents. There was not even a drunken public. There was no fights. There was no issues at all. In fact, they said it was kind of a boring event because they didn't have to do anything.
Well, I had another question. I was looking at the diagram that you had given us to look at where it showed the vendors.
Right.
and vendors are in blue, and then you have the stage done in black. And you'll need to, enlighten me on this, because I may not be asking
So,
correct, but let me ask my question. Okay, where the stage is, it's like right in the center of Madeira Way, not in the street, like it's between the buildings, like right in the center. Okay, I know sound travels. Now, facing, if I'm looking at this right, this will be facing the yacht club, the band, or the stage, correct?
Correct.
Okay, is this in stone? Can the stage be moved to
Not
another?
necessarily in stone. I think some of the issues with the last several years when we did the planning, and a lot of the issues is for a right of way at the fire lane. So as long as we can still have the fire lane and doesn't impede on the vendors and they can get through in case of an emergency, we can put the stage where we want to.
I was just thinking that I'm sorry.
That was me, sorry.
Okay, but the thing of it is that, if it's facing, facing north, it'd be facing right into the yacht club. So of course, they're gonna get the full sound of the band. If you turn it around at the end of the street here, then that means all the condos on 150th will get the full effect of the band. Is there any way the stage could be moved up near where the brown boxer is, so it'd be going like towards Gulf Boulevard, towards the water, the sound?
Absolutely, as long as we can get clearance from the fire marshal, I'm totally open to rearranging it to whatever.
I was just curious about that. Like I said, I'm not.
Actually, it'd probably work better because then there's more room for people to actually come closer to the stage and
Right.
enjoy the acts.
Because see, according to this little diagram you gave us, you do have plenty of room down here. So by putting the stage down there, that means it'd be facing the Gulf. So the noise of the band then would be going out this way, and it wouldn't affect the condos on 150th, and it really wouldn't affect too much. Hopefully the yacht club.
I'm totally open for that.
Okay, I was just curious. You're the expert on this, I'm not, but I was just curious if it could be changed around, if that would make a difference. Okay, thank you.
To elaborate a little on that, part of our discussions with the businesses along Madeira Way, that was a concern that was brought up more recently. The stage location with the businesses that are located right there. So it was, after this discussion, it was going to be further discussion about relocation of the stage because they were not too thrilled, but would be happy if we worked through it. So that was our plan.
Totally flexible.
Like I said, I was just curious. I didn't know if that would make a big difference or not, but to me, I thought it would with their back to the condos.
I think the reason why we just stuck with that was because it was already initially approved.
Okay.
So that, once approved, and we just kind of kept going. We didn't want to try to reinvent the wheel. But moving the stage is not a big issue.
Thanks, Will.
Yeah, I make a
But back to
comment
which
here?
condos, Nancy?
What's this diagram here?
Yeah,
Here? Well, see, he's got the stage set right here in the center.
Correct.
So over here, this would be 150th.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay, this is 150th up here, so, with the band right here, it's facing the yacht club.
But if you put it down by,
But they have their back.
Why
If
are
they
y'all
put the
designing
stage
this set?
with the back.
if you put it down by the brown boxer, then it's gonna go to all those condos on the other side of the street, because there's nothing to block it either.
It'd be going straight down Material Way.
But there's condos
They're pointing it down Madeira Way, you're
Well,
saying?
really, we got condos all over
Okay, I
the
thought you
place, so
meant-
really, I was just trying to think of the direction of the band. Like I said, I'm not an expert on that, so hopefully you
It's
can.
probably going to be more aesthetically pleasing too.
Okay, all right.
May I make a comment?
I agree with that. I think it would look better, but I think you're going to still
May I
have.
make a comment?
I'll put it in a second. But you're still going to hear, there's condos on the beach are going to get the noise. Or some condos are going to get the noise.
We're pretty lucky here at Madeira Beach. We're kind of had this new rebirth, and we're rebirthing with music. I remember going to, we were throwing concerts at the Rock Park, and I saw Everclear and Sugar Ray. That's awesome right here in Little Madeira Beach, and we're kind of evolving into a city of music. It's separating us between Clearwater and St. Pete Beach and Treasure Island. We're really starting to form ourselves around music, or being a musical beach city. I think that's special, and I think that's why a lot of people want to see it actually on the block, because it's our city, And Rock Park is just a huge venue that I don't think that our little event at the moment is going to be able to fill that void.
Well, not only that, like you said, you're trying to bring business into Madeira
Correct.
Bay for the businesses there.
Initially, that's what it was for. It was a great advertisement ploy for my businesses.
Sure.
And now it's like turned into that, and it's starting to pick up a good following. It's right at the same time with all the other costs and straight times starting to pick up. So I think the community is pretty excited the fact that Madeira Beach is becoming more musical.
You've made a lot of concessions on this concert, so a lot of thought went into it, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
You said Madeira Beach is becoming more musical, and as I walked around collecting signatures to run again, what I heard from a lot of the residents is the things that are coming in is geared more towards your age group. They're saying, why aren't we doing more towards the senior group, which most of the beach is the senior group?
I think you're seeing a big shift and change recently. As the baby boomers are starting to retire, they're starting to fill the condos, and the senior citizens are starting to move on to higher altitudes. And now, I think what a lot of people are missing, people my age, we're moving to the beach, and we have our families, and we're raising children here. And so we want something more than just, a quiet town for us to wait around for our final days. We're growing, we're expanding, we're evolving, and we're learning, and we're raising our children here. So, as time goes on, you're going to see more of my age group here, and they're already here, and my parents' age groups that are just retiring and starting to party, getting back into the party life. That's what we're seeing, and myself, I'm excited about it, and I hope the rest of the community is, and
I think you're right, Will, because when was it? Oh, Halloween, I read a Christmas book to the children at the rec center. And I was surprised. There were about 50 children there, and they were all in first grade, and they were all from Madeira Beach. And I thought, wow. And that's just
Treasure Island 8 years ago. We bought a house. Luckily enough, we bought a house at the Low. And when we first moved there, the first Halloween, we got like 2 trick-or-treaters. But every year, it's 8 years now. Since last year, my candy bowl was empty. I mean, I was really surprised about all the children. Of course, I have a young child now too. He's 2.5, and so we're pretty excited. We have a community with other children in there. And, we can't stop change, but what we can do is we can guide it into the direction that we want. A healthy direction. And music is always a healthy direction. I think it brings art and it brings culture. I have noticed recently we haven't had a lot of concerts at Rock Park. I'm kind of missed that. I missed the fact that we could just go see a big headliner name like right here. I have to go all the way to Janice now, or which I like Janice, but it's all the way across the peninsula. I mean, Madeira Beach, we're that place. We are going to be that place, and I think that's special, and we should hold on to it, but obviously guide that in the right direction so that we can control it and expand on it.
I'd like to make one more comment about how loud it is. Someone recently pointed out to me there's an app for that.
Correct.
So, and I didn't know that. I get calls and emails from people saying venues are too loud, and the police come and they say they don't have any way to measure it. So I just, to the general public and to the business owners and the policemen.
I have the app on my phone.
Good.
We do a lot of music and stuff like that, so obviously safety for our patrons. I think the problem with the app, though, it's not like you have to calibrate it, so it's hard to make it like a legal device, so you have to get one that could be calibrated and changed easily.
But it's some measure of
at least it gives us an idea. And last year, the Hip Abduction is a national band. They sell out the Red Rock Stadium, and I was really excited that we even got them to come. I mean, we did a lot of negotiation with them, and one of the things that they mandated in their contract was they had to use their own production. And so, okay. And when it came, it was a very large production, like what they would bring to Red Rocks. And so it was a constant battle with them, learning curves, know not to give up too much of your hand especially when it comes to planning these things. But, the very first year we had 0 complaints. So we're going to go back to that smaller production.
Madam Mayor, if I may, I also had an opportunity to speak with the deputies in regards to the policies that we have on the books with respect to amplified sound. And realistically, as it relates to this event, it is not, or any event for that matter, it's not something that we use a decimal reader or anything like that. If we hear it from 50 feet, that is one of the mechanisms that we ask individuals to obviously, turn the music down or what have you, or the amplified sound. But we have a situation whereby in the permit, this particular event, they do have the flexibility to go up to 9 p.m. Now, I know staff has had conversations about kind of getting things, winding down around 8:45 and where the music is effectively turned off at 9 p.m. But the deputies that will be on site are going to be briefed that at 9 p.m. we'd like for the music to stop. We're also going to be providing some information to the general public with respect to the event. So, if they have any, concerns, questions, comments, we're going to even change the voicemail on the city manager's line, because we do tend to get some calls or some issues with regards to that. So we'll let them know, the duration and when they can anticipate the music being turned down. And the other side is that we do want to have a more in-depth conversation with the board with regards to the citations, because the first violation is only a $50 fine. So realistically, there is no teeth. And in my conversations with the deputies, they say that that's really not a strong mechanism to drive compliance. Because if it's a great event and you're making good money, you'll pay the $50 fine, and there's not a situation where we can write you a fine every minute or something like that. So that's something that in future conversations we'll be bringing back to the board. But in the conversations that staff has had with the event organizers, there have been productive conversations. They're willing to work with staff and our deputies to ensure that the impact is as minimal as possible. But from the city standpoint, we are going to be informing the public as to what's going on to hopefully minimize the phone calls that we get, and also the phone calls and emails that you get as board members.
Yes, I'd like to make a couple comments with regards to it. I think that we've already addressed the fact that there is the market that's going to be on March 10th, which would be the week after that. We've discussed on many occasions, we've discussed the tremendous traffic and the problems that we've had on Madeira Way. So I'm definitely not for the block party to occur in March or April if we are going to have a market, okay? If we have the market through April, and then maybe, we can readdress it. But I think that and it really doesn't have anything to do with the noise. And I know you've been working very strong, a lot of effort's been going into this. But I think that it's I don't think we need to have it on two Sundays in a row. So I'm not for allowing it.
Also,
Unless you want to
there
go
was
to
the
Rock
phone calls from Seminole and the phone calls from
Reddington,
Sea Tower,
yeah.
Reddington. I got them from everybody, and it was.
And it really doesn't matter. Well, it does matter, of course, that where it's really coming from. The fact is that it's in Madeira Beach, and it happens in Madeira Beach, and so it's our community, and that's why I think that we've committed ourselves to the market. And I think that that's a great event, and I think that will bring in people, and I think they've already addressed that, the organizers, and I'm sure you might feel that way too, I hope so, that the Sunday market is a good thing. So I think we need to maybe bring it up for March.
Those kind of things need to happen in Rock Park. It's just not, Madeira Way isn't the place to do it. Where you stand?
Do we have any public comment on this?
I think it's a good thing.
I don't.
I think so.
Real quick, sorry, just to elaborate a tad on we have had the discussion about Rock Park with them about this. In this particular date, we will be wrapping up something in the morning that day. We do have the college tournaments that morning. It doesn't produce as much traffic as it would seem. They pack 15, 20 people into 3 vans. And anyway, so the last games will be kicking off or ending just about the time that they're kicking off. So there'll be a transition to traffic and no issue, but it would inhibit any sort of setup for a concert or anything on that field as we will be utilizing it. So that discussion was had, and we always have it every time we discuss this event with Will, but we just, want to ensure that it works out the best it can.
Okay, Doug, can I say something, Doug, before you do? I just wanted to remember, just came to my mind too, is that the month of March starts out of a lot of schools, a lot of universities. Spring break. That's right, thank you very much. That starts the spring break, and so that further, is
Traffic's going to be bad, period. Not to mention the fact that we're going to be blacktopping Gulf Boulevard. This is going to be real fun.
Anytime. Hi, I'm Doug Izzo. I'm with the Tampa Bay Beaches Chamber of Commerce. Just wanted to speak in support of this wonderful community event. Brings people together. I know Will has just poured his heart and soul into Madeira Beach, and he really cares. He's only doing what's best for the city. And so I hear a lot of discussion about, the noise and traffic and everything. And, we're the beaches. I mean, we're a tourist destination. We've always been busy. That's why I moved here, because there's a lot going on, It's exciting. And they have events like this. This is why our tourists come here. That's why I moved here. I do like quiet time sometimes. I vacation in the mountains or in the country, but I don't really think of this as the country. I think of this as an exciting, bustling beach community. So I think this event falls in line with all the events that go on the beaches. I mean, I don't understand how you can let the Madeira Way market operate there, but not anybody else. It feels like, you open the box once you let one person there. But I just want to say, I can't say enough good things about Will and his businesses and how wonderful he's made Madeira Way look. And I hope you all support his efforts. Thank you.
Any more public comment? Yes.
I'm not a city resident, but I'm a co-owner of Mad Beach Dive Bar, and as such, as a business.
Can you state your name, please?
Oh, I'm sorry.
And address.
Paul Smith, 7498 131st Street in Seminole. Co-owner of Mad Beach Dive Bar, and Will took a bold step here in taking down the gates and sponsoring an event without an admission. And he's doing that with the support of the businesses. He's doing this independently as a venture on the street, but supported by the businesses of which I'm a part. And I believe he needs that business support. And we see benefits on the street, which we certainly wouldn't see at Rock Park. I think Rock Park is a great venue, but that's not going to bring together the community along the street, which is what the businesses need. So that's kind of my first point. As a northerner that comes to the area now for almost a full year at a time, I do see this as an area where you expect other people around, so you put up with a little bit of slower traffic, and we see it up and down the beach all of the time. But finally, at my home over in Seminole, Wednesday evenings, I hear the high school band practicing on the football field. Friday nights, I hear football games on a regular basis throughout the fall months. I hear the concerts from the park in Seminole. So I hear things, but that doesn't necessarily make things annoying. So I think Will's efforts to control the noise should get things down to a level where, sure, you can hear it beyond the boundaries of the street, but that's what living in a city is all about. And my wife and I like the vibe in the area. We came here because it's an exciting area, and I think events like this add to the excitement. So I just echo the comments of the gentleman in front of me. Although I think you'll see I'm a much different age profile. So I think we're going to have an event that will appeal to all ages. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else have any comments? Public comment is now closed. Any more discussion from the board? All right, well, I think it's a great idea, and I think we have consensus that we will go forward.
All right, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Director Hatch. The last item on the agenda is the required annual CRS update/certification. Director Portal.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Commissioners. I'm sure that if you had a chance to read the cover memo that came with this, there wasn't anything new in it for you, and it did seem I was telling you things that anybody would have known, for instance, that Madeira Beach is on a barrier island. These are all requirements that we have to provide for the update of the CRS annually, so we have to include a lot of this data in there. It goes into your packet when we make our reports on CRS and for the FEMA reviews. One of the things that may be interesting to you, though, is the form that's included in the back is actually a summary of some of the data that we had to provide with the recent update for the community rating system, and it gives you a sense for how many projects or how many houses and buildings have been changed over the course of the last 8 years. The city has done a pretty good job overall eliminating some of the projects by way of redevelopment, that is, some of the repetitive loss areas for flooding. Things have been changed over time because of improvements that are made to the stormwater system, and then also because older houses that repetitively flooded have been taken down and replaced with other buildings, homes that do meet flood criteria, or in some cases, homes, smaller buildings have been taken down and replaced by condos and other modern things that reach the flood criteria as required. This is the type of report, though, that we will be submitting annually, and in the past, the Commission has received this report and just acknowledged it as it came into record, and then it's also forwarded to FEMA annually. On the very back, you also have been provided the copy again of the CAB report that was included in June, dealing with some of the complaints that have been made about the program here in Madeira Beach and several homes that they looked at. One of the things that they reviewed was not only, well, in great detail, they reviewed all of the homes and every page of extensive records dealing with approvals and changes made to specific structures, but they also looked at the kinds of changes we were making to the program itself and to the procedures that we use in monitoring FEMA requirements and in construction management. The staff has spent a lot of time these last few weeks because of the FEMA review, the 8-year cycle review, not only looking over the records and organizing them, but creating a system that hopefully will help the staff in the future monitor more carefully the records and keep the program on a steady track. And then also so that as the records are collected, they are automatically put into reports that are then given to FEMA. So things don't come out of control every time there's a change in staffing. We're trying to make things very routine and structured to provide you with more stability long term and a better assurance that all of the requirements are being met. That's important for maintaining your classification and hopefully over time, who knows, maybe even improving it. Every point of improvement is a reduction in insurance costs to the citizens, so we'll be looking to do everything we can. It is becoming increasingly difficult to manage these and to meet the criteria. The criteria for beach communities has actually become stronger or higher to meet, and the kind of credits you can get have been reduced for beach communities. I think this is reflective of the fact that we've had so many emergency management situations over the last few years that FEMA has depleted its budget. And so insurance rates we can expect will go up. And the credits that we get for reductions are being eliminated a little bit at a time. But we will keep you up to date. With that, we have, as I said, completed the work on our end that is required for the cycle review. Those are usually a 5-year review. In our case, it was 8 years because our normal process had been interrupted by the complaints filed earlier that the CAB report had resolved. And as you can see, that letter stated that you were in good standing, which of course only lasted from June until when they showed up to review for the cycle, and then all bets are off. They're reviewing 8 full years worth of data. That includes all permitting from 8 years back, including those permits that were issued by the county and Treasure Island on the city's behalf, which is maybe problematic. We're hoping we found all the records that were available to find and have got everything organized. But we've also beefed up our program a lot, so we're hoping that that is influential with the decision they make regarding our status. If you have any questions about this, I'd be glad to answer them. And of course, you know where to find me over time if you have comments or suggestions on managing the program.
I would just like to thank you for your diligence in getting us to this point. I know it's been a very long process, but I think your staff has just done an excellent job. And I think where we were 6 months ago and where we are now is just a world of difference. So thank you very much.
Yes, I would like to really offer appreciation for the support of the staff, especially the building staff, and having brought Jenny Rowan on was a huge help because she really jumped right in to help organize the data. You know, we're producing one thing after another, and she was putting it in all the right categories and helping us get it structured and prepared for FEMA when they showed up. And it's one of those situations where until you start doing the work, you don't realize how much of it there is and realize how time intensive it's going to be. So they were just a really good crew. They really put in a lot of extra effort and time to make sure we were ready.
You did it.
Any more discussion from
No.
the commission? Thank you very much, and I would say the same thing. Thank you. You've done a great job in pulling this all together, and you're to be commended for that. And there is public, so officially public comments open, public comments closed. And officially?
I got some things before we close.
Oh, okay.
Number one, I was wondering if you could get back with us on where the city is for closed caption for our meetings. Number two, I would like to make sure that, Linda, that you're doing something on that electrical charging stations for the car and get that back to us. I would like to, at our next workshop, bring back the fee ordinance. I would like to look at that again, especially in regards to the marina and the gas and those type of things. I don't really know how to say this next one on Planet Fantasy, or Fantasy Planet, what is Fantasy Planet? You know, I think that the city really needs to look at that. Why are we in the rental business? You know, I think that possibly we need to look at selling that and taking the proceeds from that and buying, like, there's vacant lots along the beach area, and purchasing them, turn them into parking lots. But right now, we're getting to the point, as you drive down the beach, all you're seeing is tall buildings. This way, it kind of opens it up to the residents to be able to see the water, to be able to see the beach. And if we make it parking lots, you know, the revenue from the parking would help pay for it. I think someone told me that that building the city bought back in 98, 88, I don't know, one of those 2 years. And they paid almost $900,000 for it back then. That's, how much did they pay for it? Okay, so maybe it's what it's worth today then, okay, is what I was told. But, you know, I don't think we should be in the rental business. So I think we really need to seriously look at that, and I would ask Jonathan if you and the staff would take a possible look at that. Last thing.
For the record, I agree with you about Fantasy Planet, because it's an aging building and.
Yes, it's gonna start costing more and more money, and the electric bill and everything else. Last thing, I've gotten several calls from people on Crystal Isle about the roads, and what can we do about it, and I would ask that, Mr. City Manager, if I can meet with you, with Linda Patel, with Al Carrier, and the residents down there. They've asked me to come down there and talk to them, and let's talk to them about the roads on Crystal Isle and what we can do. If we could set up a date to meet with them at the park or someplace down there, and, you know, look at the road, I guess try to figure out what it's gonna cost, what we need to do to get it all fixed up. But, you know, they keep calling me and saying, you know, you're not doing nothing about it, you know, so I wish we could move forward with that and help those people down there. Might not be the answer they want, or, you know, time-wise, because I know, like everything else, they would like it done yesterday. But, you know, maybe we can move a little bit forward in getting something done down there. So if you could set up and let me know when we could, the three of us, or, you know, from the city here, could meet, and we'll get a hold of the people down there that's been contacting me, and set up something in a place to meet, please. That's all I have. Is that enough?
And Mayor, I would just like to ask you, I currently sit on the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Commission, and just recently the director has asked if I would serve under the Bay Management Committee, and I would just like to get a consensus, or if somebody else wants to do that, that's fine. Maybe another person would like to do it. If not, I would like to accept it, and I just want the approval of the board.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, that's a great idea, and you have my approval.
Okay?
Go for it.
Thank you. I'll report back.
Do we have any other discussions?
Remember the forum tomorrow night for the candidates here in this room at 5:30? And also, we are having a meet and greet for the candidates on February the 7th at 3 o'clock in this room, and the public is welcome to attend.
Okay. Anyone else? 7 o'clock. 7?
February the 7th at 3 o'clock.
Great. All right. It's 5:08, and the meeting is adjourned.